And so in today's comprehensive tutorial, we are going to be building a full freelancer type portal app. And so we're going to be covering everything that you need to know in order to build a fully functioning app. We are going to be building things like authentication, order management, real-time chat, and most importantly, our backend of choice for the first time is going to be Supabase. And so this app is going to be built very, very differently as compared to the apps that we built before. Now, if you stick around until the end of the video, I'm going to be sharing with you my experience building this app, various issues that I had to overcome, various tips and tricks, and really things that you must know if you plan on building a similar app yourself. Now, before we get started, as always, the app that I'm about to build will be available for you to view and or clone from my Patreon page. And you can learn more about our amazing Patreon community using the link in the description below the video. So the app that we're going to be building today is going to be a Fiverr clone. And this is one of the more popular freelancer slash gig type marketplaces. And this is an app that I also have pretty good experience with because I have used it in the past to order various gigs in various niches from tons of different sellers. And so I'm pretty familiar with this app. And additionally, if you want to branch out and add more features to this app later on and turn it into something else, you'll be able to do it fairly easily. All right, first, let's talk about the different screens, the different pages, the different flows that we have to implement in our app. So I went ahead and downloaded screenshots from my Fiverr app. Okay, and there are various flows, and let's start with the home flow. Okay, so here's what happens when you log into the app. You're going to be on a page that looks something like this, and on this page you can search for various services. You also have the screen that shows you popular services, and these are presumably categories that we'll have to implement in our app as well. Next, we have this card here, and I'm not quite sure what this is. This could be just a card. This could be a link to a blog article, maybe to some knowledge-based article, and we'll be implementing that as well. Now, if we scroll down on this page, you're going to be seeing this page right here. And so we have what's new on Fiverr, eye-catching AI design. So these could be blog articles or some kind of articles here. And last but not least, we have these recently saved, and these are actual gigs. So I went ahead and saved some random gigs just to show you what it looks like. And basically, these are cards that display various gigs. Okay. Now, if you click on one of these gigs here, you're going to be redirected to this detail page here. Okay, and this is your gig detail page. And there are a couple of things happening here. So we have the image here, the gig image. We have the seller. Okay, so we have the name, we have the top rated seller, some label there, title of the gig, we have the body, and then we have the tiers. So gigs typically have various tiers. Okay, so I'm not sure if there could be more than 3 tiers. And actually, I don't think there could be more than 3 tiers. I think 3 tiers is typically the most that you can have for a gig. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be implementing a 3-tier gig system. And so you'll create a gig and you'll create the 3 tiers for that gig. Okay, so with the different prices, different titles, this is a tier title, tier description, etc., etc. And this is what happens when you scroll down on this detail page. Okay, so you see more information about you know, the delivery, all these features of this particular tier, etc., etc. Now, let's say you're searching for something. So you're searching for services. This is the screen that you're going to be redirected to. This is the search screen right here. So let's say you search for NFT. You're going to be redirected to a screen that looks something like this. We have related results. We have shop by. And these are presumably filters here. Next, we have a list of categories that your search results fall into. So I have a bunch of search results here, and all of the search results fall into these categories. Okay, so NFT art, NFT development, community management, etc., etc. And then we have a list of search results. Okay, so these are your cards, gig cards that we kind of saw here, except they're slightly different. Okay, so we have the image on the left. Here we have the image above the description. Okay, So that's the home flow. And if you take a look at the navbar here, you will see that there are various flows. Okay, so the next one that we want to discuss is the inbox. Okay, and this is your real-time chat, communication type functionality. And so the idea here is that when you create an order, so when you order a gig, you'll be able to communicate with the seller. So if you want to ask them to, clarify something, etc., etc. And so you're going to have this chat functionality built into the app, and we're going to be implementing this as well. Next, we have this category view. Okay, so this is your view where you can also search for services, but this time you have various categories. So if you are not yet sure, what to search for, or you are not sure what kind of gig you're looking for, you can start with a category type flow. So you can begin with a category. Okay, so maybe you want to do graphics and design, maybe you want to do digital marketing, writing and translation. And so you have these categories here, and then on the right hand side we have interests. Okay, so when you click on any of these categories, you're going to be shown a page that looks like this. So for instance, if I click on graphics and design, I'm going to be seeing this page. I'm going to see a little category image, followed by the title, a little description, and then I'm going to be seeing more categories. So logo design, brand style guides, etc. And let's say I click on logo design, and I'm going to be redirected to a page that looks like this. So for logo design, I'm going to have the filters, I'm going to have, the type of gigs or some kind of grouping, and last but not least, I finally have the list of gigs. So this view here is very, very similar to this one here. Very, very similar. So as you can guess, once we develop one of these, we're going to duplicate it and use it to create the other one. So we'll probably do this one first, and then we'll use that one. We'll duplicate it, and we'll use it as a template to create this view here. Okay, so that was the category view. And you also can browse by interest. So the exact same flow, except these are interests now. So if you choose interest, you have your interest, you can choose interest. And if you click on choose interest, you're going to be shown a page that looks like this. So if you select any of these interests, you're going to be redirected back to this page, except it's actually going to be displaying your interest. So you're not going to have this button again. Okay, so here you can pick the interest, and once you pick your interest, you're going to be seeing the appropriate gigs. Okay, next we have the order management screen. Okay, and on this screen you can see all your orders. So I have completed orders and I have canceled orders, and the idea here is that you will see what's happening with you as a buyer. So let's say maybe you're purchasing a bunch of gigs and you want to know what's been happening with them, right? So this is not kind of like chatting. You're not exactly chatting, right? You don't need to chat with a seller in order to have the gig completed, but you will be getting order statuses as your gig progresses from, start to finish. Okay, so when I purchase a gig as a buyer, I'm gonna see statuses, right? I'm gonna see, okay, purchased. I'm gonna see that, the seller, the service provider has started to work on the gig. Maybe they need clarification. Maybe I want to clarify something. All of that is going to be happening right here. And so this is a very, very important screen, and we definitely need to implement it correctly. And last but not least, we have the profile page. Okay, so this is your standard profile page where you have various preferences, account, etc., etc. Not much really to discuss here, because these profile pages are standard on pretty much any app out there. Okay, so every app that we've built on this channel has a profile page. Okay, so now that we talked about the UI, the different flows, the different functionality, let's talk about the database structure and schema. Okay, so if we come over here, we have a database structure, and remember, we are using Supabase. Okay, so when it comes to database structure and schema, this is going to be radically different compared to our previous apps where we used Firebase, FirestoreDB. So Supabase is a relational database, which means you need to create different tables, views, link them together in a way that gets your data to the UI, as we're going to see a little bit later when we start building the app. And so when it comes to your database structure, I have one rule that I follow all the time. I start with some initial tables, but I give myself the freedom to modify the schema and the structure as I go along. Okay, and you probably might have noticed this happening in my previous apps. I typically start with a bunch of tables, but then I end up having a lot more tables. And this is completely standard. This is completely normal because you really can't anticipate, how the app is going to look and what kind of, tables or database structure you need later on the app. And so having said that, these are our initial tables. So we have the users table, okay? And this is going to be both sellers and buyers. So the users table is provided to you by Supabase. So you don't have to create this, okay? If you are using authentication, which we're going to be using for this app, users is going to be automatically provided. Next, we have the gigs table, okay? And this is going to have our gigs, okay? So so sellers typically create gigs, and buyers will be purchasing the gigs. And so me as a buyer, I can purchase many gigs and a seller can create multiple gigs. Okay, so this is very important to keep in mind because you have that relationship, one to many from the buyer side and one to many from the seller side. Okay, next we have the orders. And so the way to think about orders is that you have a gig that is a template and the order comes from that gig. Okay, so you might have like, this gig, like do some translation, and then you can have multiple orders from multiple people associated with that gig. So keep that in mind. It's very, very important to start kind of, creating these relationships in your head. Okay. And once again, sellers and buyers can have multiple orders. So I can say, I can have multiple orders from different gigs as a buyer, and the seller can have multiple orders from their own gigs from different buyers. So these are not going to be the same orders. Okay. And last but not least, we have categories. Okay. Now, categories, unlike the previous tables, especially gigs and orders, is going to be mainly a top level categories, right? Because when you think about categories, they're not really associated with anything. It's just plain data. Whereas gigs and orders, they have links to something. Like a gig is going to have a link to users because a gig by itself cannot exist. An order is going to have a link to gigs, and it's also going to have a link to users as well, because just an order by itself is meaningless. Whereas categories, on the other hand, categories by themselves are just standalone. Now, what we decided to do here, and judging by the UI, so remember we have this UI, this category view, we decided to create a two-level structure. So you're going to have your top-level categories, and then you're going to have your second-level categories, like child categories. And the way that we're going to be doing it is we're going to have one category table, but we're going to have a field there called parent ID. And so if a record, so if a category record inside this table doesn't have a parent ID, that means it's a top level category. It doesn't have any parents because it's top level category. Whereas if another record, a category record, has a parent ID, it's a child category, and the parent ID connects that child category to the parent category. And that's kind of what we have. And this allows us to use one table for both top level categories without parents and child categories that are linked to a specific parent. And so we don't really need to have multiple tables for parents and children in this instance. This allows us to have a very kind of concise organizational structure, if you will. And so this is our initial database structure and schema to get us started. And now we are ready to go to the next step. All right, so in this section, we are going to be building the database. So we're going to be setting up our project, creating various tables, permissions, things like that. And what's interesting is that we're going to be using Supabase for this specific project. And Supabase is very, very different from Firebase's Firestore, which is what we typically use for our apps. So everything regarding the database setup is going to be drastically different. In any case, let's get started. So you want to head over to supabase.com and you want to create your free account. I already have my free account. So I can go to my dashboard, and here in my dashboard, I can create a new project. So I'm going to click on a new project right here. I'm going to call my project project1, and then I'm going to enter a password. So I'm just going to type a password right here. Next thing I want to do is I want to click on create new project right here, and I need to wait a few moments for this project to be created for me. All right, so here I am logged into Supabase's dashboard, and because I don't have any projects, I'm going to click on a new project here, and I'm going to give my project a name. We're going to call it FiverDB, and I'm going to give it a password as well. Next, I'm going to click on create new project, and I need to wait a few moments for the project to be created. All right, so my project has been created, and the next thing I want to do is I want to create some tables for this project. So I'm going to go into the table editor here, and I don't have any tables, so I'm going to create a couple of tables. Now, what tables do I need? Well, if I go to our database schema, we have our users table, but this users table is going to be created for us automatically as part of authentication, as you're going to see a little bit later in the video. Besides that, we have the gigs table, we have the orders, and we have the categories. So let's begin with the gigs table first. Come back here, let's call it gigs. Everything else is optional. We're going to enable row level security, and we have various columns. Now with Supabase, you have various fields or columns that are included by default. So in this case, we have the ID, which is the primary key, which is very, very important. And then we have the created ad, which is going to be automatically filled in with the proper timestamp every time that there's a new record that is created. This is very, very useful, but we still need a couple of custom columns, and more specifically, we need maybe the name of the gig. And so we're gonna have the name, we're gonna set it to text, maybe a description as well. So description, actually, let's just call it this for description. And we have the name and the description. So this is fine for now. Obviously, I'm gonna be modifying these tables and adding the various pieces of data a little bit later. But right now, I just want to create something so that we have something to test. So I'm going to click on save, and it's going to create this new table for us. All right, so we have this one table created. Let's do the same for the other tables as well. Come back here, we have orders and we have categories. So let's create orders, and let's create a new table. Let's call it orders. And so let's see, we have the ID created at. Now for the orders, typically it's going to get information from the actual gig, right? If you think about the orders, the gig is the template. The orders are like based off that gig. So we don't really need a lot of things for the orders specifically, but we do need nodes, right? We do need nodes. We need like the gig ID and things like that. So let's put in the nodes here. Let's make it text. And I'm also going to add the gig ID because we need to be able to link to the gig so that, you know, they're linked together, so that, you know, if the orders table needs to get some information from the gig that it was created from, it can get that data. So we're going to have that here. And we are going to use the int 8, which is the basic type used for IDs here. Okay, so that's fine for now. Like I said, later on, we might add a couple of fields here and there. We're going to hit save. And one last table is categories. Okay, and categories is an important one because of the way that we're going to be structuring. So new table categories, and we have ID created at. Now, the thing about categories is, if you recall, if you come back over here, what's going to happen is we're going to have kind of this main category, and then we're going to have subcategories. Okay, so I noticed that with Fiverr, right? So like programming and tech, we might have, you know, website development under programming and tech, and we might also have website maintenance under programming and tech. So we need to preserve that relationship, right? It's very, very important. So how are we going to do that? Well, there's lots of ways of doing it, but the simplest way is to have another field that's going to be part of categories, and that field is going to be called parent ID. And if that parent ID is set to something, that means this is a child category of the corresponding parent category. Okay, so we have the ID, we have the created ad, we're gonna have the name, and this is going to be text. We're gonna have description, this is going to be text. We're also going to have I think for now that's fine, name, description, and then I'm gonna give it a parent ID. So This is going to be parent ID, and this is going to be the ID of the category that is linked to. And so the way that this is going to work is, if a category does not have a parent ID, it's going to be a top level category. But if it has a parent ID, then it's going to be a second level category. We're only going to have 2 levels here. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit save and have that table created. All right, so now we have 3 tables here, and we also have the users table, which is created automatically for us. So if you head over here and you go into auth, you're going to have the users table. And in this table, you're going to have a collection of users that are going to have login access to the app. So we're going to be using Supabase authentication as well. And so what we want to do is we want to also create users here. Now, before we finish with our tables, there's one last thing that we need to do for each of the tables, and that is enable the right permission. So if you recall, we have RLS, which is row level security. And so that means that it's going to have, a certain type of security on a row basis. Just by default, nobody can access this data because we haven't set the proper policies. And so that's what we have to do. So if you click here, we have RLS enabled, but we don't have any policies created yet. And so what we can do is we can create a new policy. Once you click here, you have a couple of options. I'm just going to go for full customization here, and I'm going to select all, and I'm going to give it a policy name. So I'm just going to say allow all. Okay, and so this is going to allow all access, right? So read and write access. And this is fine for testing. Obviously, for production, you want to make sure that you have the right type of policies and the right type of row level security. But this is fine for just getting the app up and running. Okay, so we're going to type true here, and then I'm going to click on review, and it generated the policy for us, like the SQL statement here, and I'm going to click on save policy. Okay, and we need to do that for all the tables. Okay, and so I'm going to go back to the other table as well. We're going to set this policy for gigs as well. New policy, full customization, allow all, and this is going to be true. Review, save policy, and the same thing here. All right. So now we have 3 tables, and each table has a policy that essentially allows all access. Okay, so all read and write access, and this is fine for testing our app. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to head over to authentication, and I want to create a user. So I'm going to click on users right here, and I'm going to add a user manually. Okay, I'm going to click on add user, and here I'm just going to create an account here, and we're going to auto confirm the user, create user. Okay, and the user has been successfully created. Now this user is going to have a user ID, which later in the app we can link to various things. Okay, so gigs, orders, we can use this user ID to create a relationship between different pieces of data. All right, so now we have the tables, we have the user, and one last thing I want to do is I want to add some dummy data to our table so that when we create our first screens in FlutterFlow, we'll be able to see some data. Let's go ahead and insert a row. So I'm just going to fill in the name, and the name we're going to be using graphics and design, and I'm going to create a category called video editing. Okay, so I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to say video editing, something like this, and this is going to eventually have a parent ID of that main category that we're going to enter later. Okay, so I'm going to hit save, and let's go ahead and create another category real quick. Let's say translation. Okay, so come back here, add another row, translation. All right, so we have here 2 categories for now, and this is enough. Let's do the same thing for gigs real quick. Insert a row, and for this gig, let's take a look at some of the screens and see what kind of data we can fill it in. So here's the name and here's the description. So let's think of a name. I will edit your YouTube videos for you. I am a great video editor. I will edit all kinds of videos for you. And let's create another one real quick. Insert a row. Translation. I will translate your documents. I'm an experienced translator who will translate all kinds of documents. Okay. All right. So now we have some data in categories as well as gigs, and this is enough to kind of get started. Okay. So now that we've set up our Supabase database along with tables, along with some data, we are ready to start building the app as well as building the initial screens and at least displaying this data and trying to get everything together. So I'm going to head over to FlutterFlow, which is my favorite no-code builder, and we're going to create a brand new project. So I'm going to click on create new, and I'm going to call this Fiverr app, and I'm going to say create blank. We're not going to be using Firebase, start building. Okay, so now we have our initial app here created. The next thing we want to do is we want to go into settings and we want to configure Supabase. So if you scroll down, you have integration, Supabase, enable Supabase, and now we need to enter a couple of fields. So API URL and anon key, and you can get that by going into your project settings here, and you can go into API and you can copy this URL right here, paste it in here, go back here and copy this anon public. Okay, you want to make sure you copy this one, not this one. Okay, copy that, paste here. Next, you want to click on get schema, and it pulls all our schema, so all our tables, all the fields, everything. So as you can see, you have categories, you have this primary key here, you have this created ad, gigs, and orders. Okay, so we now have the initial stages of our app that has been configured with Supabase. Okay, so now we can start building the initial screens and displaying the data. All right, the next thing that we want to do is we want to configure authentication. Okay, so we're going to come here, click on authentication. You want to enable authentication. For authentication type, you want to enable Supabase, and now you need to set up your page. So the entry page is going to be the login page. It's going to be the page where the user needs to log in, and the logged in page is going to be the home page. Okay, so we only have the home page, so we can select home page here, but we still need to create the login page. So we're going to come back here, check out our pages, click here, and we want to pick a login page. So for the login page, I typically use this page right here. There's all kinds of nice pages that you can use, but I like this page or this page. In fact, let's just use this page right here, and let's say call it login, create page, and now we have the login page here. And so you can sign in and sign up as well for our app. Now I'm going to disable Google just to keep things very, very simple. Next thing you want to do is you want to go to settings and integration, and you want to select this login page as the entry page here. And now we are in business. So now we can actually run our app and log in as the user that we've created in Supabase and see if that's going to work and if we're going to be redirected to the home page. That is the first step. You always want to be testing to make sure that you catch the errors early on. Okay, so we're starting our app. Let's wait a few moments for everything to kind of compile and start executing. All right, so here's our app up and running. Let's go ahead and log in. And now, as you can see, we have successfully logged in using Supabase authentication, using the user that we've created back in Supabase. So at least now we know that the app works, authentication works, things work at this point. And so now we can actually start building the app and start building the initial screens. All right, so the first thing that we want to do is we want to start building with this homepage here. So this homepage right here is essentially, you have a search bar, so you can search for all kinds of services right off the bat. And then you have this list view here that lists popular services, but it lists the categories, essentially the categories of the popular services. So like logo design, AI artists, logo animation in this case. And then we have what looks to be like a, I don't know, some kind of a card, maybe a link to a blog article. It's not really clear. And then if you scroll down, there's another list view. In this instance, this is what's new on Fiverr. And then we have recently saved gigs here. Okay, so there's a couple of things going on here, mainly a couple of list views, you know, some kind of a card here, and saved gigs as well, right? So let's get started and start building out this page here. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is we have the home page here, and I want to rename it to, let's say, homepage. Okay, now the next thing I want to do is I want to create a special container, a special card for these categories to display them as a horizontal list view. Okay, so we're going to create a container, and inside the container, we're going to put a list view. Okay, now we're going to click on this list view. We're going to make sure it is horizontal here. Okay, and if we go to the container, this container has a bounded width. We're going to deselect that, and we also have a height, and the height will depend on the individual cards. So we're just going to leave it at 100 for now. And here, what I want to do is I want to add a card that's going to represent the individual category. So we have a card here, which is essentially a container. And now let's design our card. So if you take a look at the cards here, we have an image and we have the name of the category. So categories need an image, and then they're gonna display the name. And also you have this header here, popular services, okay, that we're gonna add above all this. Okay, so right now inside the card, let's add a column, and inside the column, let's add an image, and let's add a text. Okay, so now it's gonna be aligned like this, and let's go ahead and fix this so it doesn't take up the whole screen basically, and that's because of this image width. We remove that, and so what we want to do is we want to set a bound on the image. So you can do something like 75 that looks pretty good. You can do 100 by 100, something like this. That looks pretty clean. Maybe set the height a little bit, yeah, something like this. So we have the image here, and the other thing I want to do is I want to give it some padding so it doesn't just take up the whole space here. So something like this, that is starting to look good. And the next thing I want to do is let's go ahead to our card, let's go to our container, and we can increase the height of the container. Okay, so we can make it something like 130. Okay, and now everything is displayed properly. Okay, and we can also give it a little bit of padding on this column right here, maybe 5. Okay, that looks pretty good. That looks all right. Let's go ahead and fix this up. Okay, so that's starting to look nice. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let's see if we can do something like this, and we'll play around with it. We'll see what happens. And so now we have a list view that will display the categories. Okay, but before that, we need to have this popular services and COL. So that's going to be part of this container here, but it's going to be above the list view. And so what we can do is we can create another container here, and this container is going to contain the row, the header essentially, that we're going to be displaying various information for this container. So I'm going to add a row right here, and we're going to expand, maximize the height as well. And this row, we're going to have text. We're going to have text, and we're going to align it on opposite ends, something like this. Let's go ahead and add an inner container here, app widget container, and then give it some padding so that it's nicely padded, something like this. Okay, perfect. So now we have this container up on top, and this is going to say popular services, and this is going to say COL, popular services, and this is going to be a little bit bigger font face, so maybe something like this, and this is going to say COL, something like this. Okay, that looks pretty good. And now what we can do is we can go to the list view, and we can populate it with the data from Supabase. So click here, Supabase query, table is going to be categories, list of rows. You can do single row as well. Let's go ahead and do that. And now it's going to be populated like this, and it's going to display like this. Now, we don't have images in the database. We need to populate it with some images. But right now, we can display the name of the categories, right? So categories row, we can do name, okay? All right. And in order to display the images, let's go ahead and update our category records with a couple of random images just to show you how that works. So we're going to go back to our database, go to our table editor here, go to our categories, and we have these categories. Let's go ahead and add a image URL here. We're going to insert a new column, image URL, and the type is going to be text. Okay, save. And here I found a random image. We can just save this image right here. Go back to Supabase, go to storage, create a new bucket here. Let's say we call it images. You can just do public bucket right here, click save, and then we can simply drag and drop our files there. Okay, so this is our image right here, and we can get the URL. So get the URL, then we can go back to our table editor here, categories, and we have the images URL. So I'm just going to paste the image here, image right there, and I'm going to do the same for the next record here. Let's come in here and maybe something like this, download that right there. there. Go back to our storage and upload the second image. Okay, and this is the second image. Get URL, go back to our tables and paste the URL right there. Okay, so now we have the images URLs that we can use in our app. Go back to our app and go come back to settings, Supabase right here, and you want to get schema, and it's going to get the new schema with the image URL. So we can go back here, come back here, and we can actually set the path. So categories row, and there's the image URL. Okay, so now if we run this app, we should have this list view here, this horizontal list view, showing us, listing us the categories that we have in the table. So let's go ahead and run this app just to make sure things work. All right, so here's our app. Let's go ahead and log in using the account that we've created. All right, and we've just logged in and we are seeing the home page. Okay, so you have this popular services, it says see all, and we are seeing the initial two categories. And as you can see, we see the images as well as the title. So these cards are working fine. We just need to align it correctly so that it's aligned to the left. But if we have more, and we will have more categories, it's going to take up the whole screen, right? It's going to take up the entire width. So it's not something we need to worry about. We will need to scroll at that point. So this is fine. Let's go ahead and add that main big card that Fiverr has, and then let's go ahead and add another container that's going to have the saved gigs as well. There's going to be an interesting flow of how we can get that data and kind of organize it. Okay, so let's go back to our app and let's create another container here. And one thing that's nice to do in this case, because we have a lot of containers, lots of things happening, is you want to kind of name these containers. So I'm just going to call this main card, and this container here, I'm going to call this our list view. Okay, so we have this list view, we have this main card, and now we can implement that main card container. And what does it have? Well, it looks something like this. There's an image, some text, and that's about it. And that could be linked to some blog article or, I don't know, some knowledge base article, things like that. So let's go ahead and do that right now. All right, so what we can do is we can create a stack inside, and inside the stack, we're going to have an image, and we're also going to have a piece of text that's going to overlay on top of this image. And we can actually overlay it like this. So as you can see, there's the text, and let's make it a little bit lighter color so that you can see it. Okay, so there's the text. Let's go ahead and remove the constraints of this card, and now it's taking up the whole space. Well, almost. Let's go ahead and fix this image right here. Remove this, remove that. Okay, that looks better. All right, so now we have this card here with the image background. Let's go ahead and center it as well. We can just wrap it inside of a row and center the row, and this thing is centered. And let's go ahead and give this text a little bit of padding. Okay, so we can do something like this. And now it's padded from the corner here, kind of like we have this thing here, right? So let's say explore beautiful work picked for you. Okay, so let's go ahead and change that. Explore beautiful work picked for you. Okay, and then we can wrap this text in a kind of a box here. Set the width, remove the height, and remove the color as well. Okay, and now we have this thing nicely bounded by this container that we have on top of it. And we can also change the container a little bit to 50, something like this. And now it's starting to look like what we had here, right? Except this image obviously has a gradient, so we might have to post-process the image, get it to have a little bit of a gradient as well. And we can also resize the image a little bit, so we can make it a little bit wider, something like this. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And we can also pad this row a little bit as well from the top, so there's some spacing, something like this. And we can also give this row a container. We can have another external container there, so we can wrap this in the container, and that container we can do padding, we can do all kinds of interesting things. So we have this container right here, and we can give this main card some padding as well, so we can do something like 15. Okay, so now you have this beautiful container there, and you have this card, and you have a nice kind of white background color so that it kind of sets it apart. So kind of what we have here. And last but not least, let's add this recently saved card. And this is going to be easy because it's essentially the same design, the same format as this top popular services card. And it even says the same thing in the header. So recently saved, see all, popular services, see all. So we can just copy and paste that and change the contents of this card. So we're gonna go back here. We can just select this whole thing here and copy this. So I can just go in here and I can just duplicate it and I can simply rearrange it, right? So this is our copy right here. I can just put that right there. And now it's at the bottom and we can change what it says. And what does it say? It says recently saved, so that we don't mix them. Recently saved, and see all is fine. And now we can also copy this list view. We can just duplicate it right here. We have this list view here and we can just put it below it. Okay, so now we have the second list view and I can rename it as well. List view save. Okay, this is list view save. This is popular list view services. So that way we can see exactly what's going on. This is our main card. This is main card row. And here is our recently saved header. Recently, okay, and this is going to be our recently saved gigs. Now in order to display these recently saved gigs, we need to create another table that's going to have a relation of gigs that are saved by different people. Okay, so let me go ahead and show you how that's done. We're going to go back to Supabase and we're going to create a new table, and this table is going to be called gigs saved, and we're going to have ID created at, then we're going to add a column, and the first column we're going to be adding is going to be the gig that's being saved, the gig in the question. So we're going to say gig ID, and this is going to be a foreign key. So we're going to edit our foreign key relation, and we're going to link back to gigs because it's a key that's linked to another table. So this is a gigs key and ID. Okay, we're going to hit save. Next, we're going to add another column here, and this column is going to be the user. So this is going to be user ID. So who is the user that saved this? So we're going to come here, we're going to add a foreign key auth, and this is going to be the users table. Okay, and the column that user is going to reference is going to be the ID, and this is the user ID that we can access throughout the app. So we're going to hit save, and now what we have is a special table that is going to have the various gig IDs that are saved by a particular user. Okay, so if I save a particular gig, there's going to be the ID of that gig and the ID of the user. Okay, so we're going to hit save here. This is a special relationship table or relation table. So we're going to wait for this table to finish saving and finish creating. All right, so now we have the special relationship table created. And this is kind of what we need to do anytime we want to have a relationship between different tables, different entities. This is how you do it in a relationship type database such as Supabase. Okay, so I can add a new row here, and I need to know the gig ID and I need to know the user ID. So let's go ahead and find a gig ID here. And yeah, it's 1. And let's go ahead and get the user ID here. So if we go to auth, we go into users, and this is the user ID of the only user we have. So I can just copy this cell content, go back to our public schema, go for gig save, and I can insert this new relation here. Okay, so gig ID is 1, user ID is me. Okay, so this means that I save this gig that has a primary ID, or the main ID, the primary key of 1. Okay, so now we have this. So now we have one saved gig, and obviously, as you can imagine, when you start building this app, your users will start using this app. You're gonna have a lot of rows, because I may have 20 saved gigs, somebody else might have 30, and that's kind of what you have to do. This is called a relational database. Now, before we test out our app, we need to make sure that we have the proper policies for this new table that we created here. So if you click on RLS policies here, you need to create a new policy just like we did with the other tables. So I'm going to say allow all. This is going to return true, review, save policy, and now we can run our app, get the schema, and we have this gig saved here. Okay, so we have this gig ID and we have the user ID. Okay, so let's go ahead and display the saved gigs here, at least display something. Yeah, so we're gonna go to our list view here, select this list view, edit backend query, and we're going to be doing gig save. And we can do a filter here, right? So we can add a filter, and the user ID, we want it to be equal to us, right? And if you click here, we have this authenticated user and user ID. Okay, so we're going to hit this, and we should have one element if everything works as expected. And here we can remove this field so that the app does not have any issues. Let's take a look. Yeah, so this has an issue because we don't have the image for the gig yet, but we're gonna have that as we continue building the app. Okay, so we should have one item here. Okay, let's go ahead and run this app, create a new session right here. All right, so here's our app, and as you can see, we have one item here which corresponds to one record that we have in our database. So if we go to our table and we go to gig save, we have this one record, and we're filtering by this user ID of the logged in user, of the authenticated user, which is me in this case. And so we are getting this record here being displayed. Of course, we need to get the right data. We need to get the gig's image and the gig's name as well, and a bunch of other information like the owner of the gig, etc., etc. And that's what we need to do right now. Now, we do have a minor problem here, is that when we are trying to display the gigs, the saved gigs, we need to display a lot of information, right? Maybe we want to display the name of the gig, maybe the person who created the gig, just like what we have here. So if you take a look at the screen, we have these images here, and we might have the person, we have ratings, we have a lot of information. And the issue that we have is we're pulling data from this gig saved, and gig saved only has the gig ID, right? So we have this gig ID, we have the user ID, but we don't have this additional information. And so what we need to do is we need to follow this gig ID back to gigs, and we need to pull up additional information. So we have this relationship. We have the gigs, we have the gigs saved, but we only have the gig ID and the gig saved. So we need to take that gig ID, go back to gigs, and pull up the necessary information. Okay, and there's obviously a couple of ways of doing it. You can store this information here, but it's not technically the right way of doing it when it comes to relational databases. The best approach is to create a view that's based on the data that you have here, but this view gives you additional data. And so before we can even display this additional data, we need to have this view created where we can query it just like a regular table, but that view is going to have this additional pieces of data. And so I'm going to show you how to do that. But before we do that, we need to create some additional fields on this gig, right? So if you take a look at the screen here, these gigs, they have images. And so at least we need another field that, has images, okay? And so let's go ahead and create another field here, another column that's going to contain the gig image, okay? So I'm just going to say image here, and we are going to give it a type of text because it's going to be a URL, and we're going to hit save. Okay, and now we have this new field created. So I'm going to go ahead and find some random images for these gigs. All right, so here's the first image for one of these gigs. Let's go ahead and save it. And here's another image here. Let's go ahead and save this right there. Okay, let's go ahead and jump back into our Supabase, go back to storage and upload these images. All right, so here are the files. You can click on that, get the URL. Let's go ahead and add the corresponding URLs to our tables. Let's go back to gigs, and let's go ahead and add this URL here, and the second URL, this MStudio right here, and paste that in there. Okay, and so now that we have the images for the individual gigs, now what we need to do is create another view that's going to be based on this gig save, but it's going to have this additional information. And so the way you create a view is by coming into here as a SQL editor here, and you can create the view by entering a query. So you have various templates, quick start, so you can click on template and you can add a view, add a column, so you can do all kinds of interesting things. You also have quick starts that essentially come with it creates a table with all the countries in the world. We don't need any of that. We just want to create the view. So you can just go to templates, add a view, and here it creates a random view for you. Now, what's beautiful about Supabase is that Supabase also has AI, which is probably based on GPT-4, GPT 3.5. And so you can actually tell it what you want to happen. This is very, very convenient because creating views and SQL, it's very, it could be very painful, right? If you don't have experience with it, it could be a mess. So you can actually come in here and you can tell Supabase AI exactly what you want to happen, what kind of view you want to create. So I'm going to do that right now. All right, so here's my prompt here. Create a view based on gigs saved that displays all the fields and gig image. So you can do even plus gig image. And let's go ahead and execute this prompt here. It's thinking. Let's see what it's going to come up with. And this is what it came up with. So it's showing you before, we had nothing before, and showing you what it came up with. Let's go ahead and do accept change. And this is what we have. So it creates a view, gigs saved view as, and then it pulls up all the data from gigs saved. And this is exactly what we want because it's pulling all that data and it's expanding it, right? And the way it's expanding it, it's joining it back on the gigs table. So it's taking gigs saved, it's connecting it to gigs on that ID, which is exactly what we want. And then it's pulling in the data. And this is the data that is going to show it to us, right? It's going to select the ID, created at gig ID, user ID, and then the image. So it's exactly like gig saved, but we have the image, which is exactly what we want, So we're going to click on run. And that's hopefully is going to create the view for us. So it says here, success, no rows returned. So this is success because this is a create view. We're not trying to get any data. And now if you go to this table editor right here, you're going to see a new view here, right? It says gigs saved view. And when you click on this view, you're going to see all the elements. You're going to see all the data here, right? And views are read only because they're kind of a window. It's like a window into your data. You're not working with the data. It's like you're looking into a window and you're seeing the data, right? The storage, the warehouse, whatever you want to call it, but you can't edit the view, right? The view just gives you a way to get the data. And so now we have this gig saved view, which is essentially gigs saved with additional data. In this case, we have the image, but we can create a new view. We can modify view. We can do a lot of interesting things. So if you click on definition, you're going to see this view here. And as you can see, it's read only. So you will have to create a new view if you want more information, but this is easy, right? You can just specify more fields that you want. And so now that we have this view, what we can do is we can go back to our app, pulling data from that view, right? So we can come in here, go into Supabase here, get schema, that's fine. And now we have a read-only view here, okay? So now we can query this view like we are querying tables, okay? So we have this image, but we also want the name of the gig as well. For now, we probably want other information, but for now, we want the name as well. So I'm going to go back to our view over here, or I'm going to go back here, and here's our view, and I'm going to add another field. I'm going to say G name, and it even auto fills it for me. Okay, so I'm going to execute this right here, and now it's telling us gig saved view already exists. So I'm going to create a new view here, and now we have another view. So we're going to go back to our database table editor, and we have the second view here. And so now that we have these two views, we really don't need two views. And so what I can do is I can do a drop view, and I can type in the view. So this is going to be this view right here, and then I can create a new view by the same name. So we're going to execute this query here, and it says success, no rows returned. And if you go back to our table editor, and here in our table view, we only have this one view. And if we click on this one view here, we will see all the data that we need in order to display it in the UI. So take a look at this. We have the user ID, we have the image, and we have the name. So we are getting data from multiple tables, and now we have this data ready and good to go into our UI FlutterFlow. And so that way, inside of FlutterFlow, we don't need to mess with this data. We don't need to do multiple queries. We don't need to, pull data here, then pull data here, and all of this. We are doing it in Supabase where it should be done. And so now we can go back into our app. We can do a get schema, refresh our schema here. And now we have this gig saved view, and we have images, and we have name of the gigs. that are saved by the logged in user, which is perfect. So now we can go back to our app, go to this list view here, edit backend query, and we're going to select gig saved view, confirm. And what we want to do is actually we have that filter there. We still have the user ID filter, but now we have access to images and to the name of the gig. So let's go ahead and change the images here. Gig save view image, and this name, do that as well. Name. Okay, so now let's go ahead and restart our app, and hopefully we will be able to see that 1 gig that's linked to me. So that 1 gig that I hypothetically saved. So let's go ahead and run this app. All right, so here's our app, and we have these popular services that's obviously going to fill the rest of the row here. We have this card, and we have that single gig that's saved with my user ID. So this is the gig that I saved here. And obviously if I save more gigs, they're going to be there. But the important thing here is that we are getting all the information that wasn't in that table. And this is the first big lesson of dealing with relational databases. They are better at some things, but they are more painful in others. So you kind of have to pick and choose. And so as we continue building this app, you're going to see me expose some of the other features and techniques when it comes to relational databases such as Supabase.
I really hope you're enjoying the video tutorial so far. This type of tutorial was requested by many of you who wanted to see a complex app built with Supabase. Now, if you're interested in building apps yourself without writing a line of code, whether they're mobile, desktop, or web apps, then you should definitely check out Mastering FlutterFlow, which is my premium training and community for people who are interested in building no-code apps with FlutterFlow, the easiest and most powerful no-code builder out there. When you join Mastering FlutterFlow, you'll get access to high-quality video modules that walk you step by step through FlutterFlow's key concepts and features, showing you step by step how to assemble the app of your dreams. Additionally, you'll also get invited to our private Discord community where myself and other members of our team will help you with any app development issues that may come up, regardless if you're a beginner or a seasoned dev who needs another opinion. We've got your back. There's really no better time to build the app you've been putting off for a while. Join Mastering FlutterFlow and make it happen today. I sincerely hope to see you inside the community.
All right, so the next thing that I want to work on is this detail page, because from anywhere that you click on, any gig that you click on, it's going to redirect here. And this is where you can learn more about that gig. You can learn about the services offered. You can learn about how much it costs, and you can ultimately order this gig as well. So let's start working on this page right here. So this page has an image. It has the seller, the person who is offering the gig, the title, description, and then some tiers. Now these tiers will have to have a unique way of kind of organizing them by creating another table and then creating another view, and this is something that I see right away. So this is all going to be covered right now. Okay, so let's go back to our app and create here a new page, and we're going to create a blank page, and we're going to call it detail. Okay, create page. This is our detail. So this is our gig detail. Now, the next thing that we need to do, because this is going to be a detail page, we're going to be passing a parameter to this page. So we want to configure our parameters, because we're going to be taking this parameter and getting all the gig information. Okay, so this parameter is going to contain the gig ID. We're just going to have gig ID like this, and gig ID is going to be an integer. Okay, and it's going to be required, right? Because without the gig ID, we won't be able to display anything. And at this top level, we can do a query and get all the gig information right away. So we can just come in here, and here we can do a backend query at top level, Supabase query, and we have gigs here. And so what we can do is we can select, have a single one, add a filter, and we are going to be doing ID equals to the parameter that we're passing. And this should be something like this. Let's double check that filter, and that should be gig ID right there. Okay, so now we're passing this gig ID, and then we're doing the query, the select statement essentially, and that gets us all the information. So now we are gonna have all the information having to do with the gig, assuming that we pass that gig ID. The next thing we want to do is start building out the elements on this page. So I want to create this image right here. That's the first thing. Just gonna add an image right here. Let's go ahead and expand it like this, and we'll resize it a little bit later. Next, we need this thing here that displays the seller information. Okay, very, very important. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna have a container right here. We're going to remove the width so that it expands to contain all its elements. And now we want to populate it. So let's go ahead and add a row right here. And let's go ahead and add an image. This is going to be even like a circle image because it's an avatar. And so we have this avatar. Next, we have this thing and this thing. So this is a column. Okay, so we need to add a column, and this column needs to be expanded, right? Because the avatar is just taking up the minimal amount of space, and this thing is taking up the maximum amount of this row. So we want to add a column here, and inside the column we're gonna have two text fields here, and this whole column we want to make it expanded, so something like this, and we want it to be left justified, so something like this. And this is going to be the name of the seller, and this is you know, their status. So in some cases, you know, they're going to be a top rated seller. In other cases, there's probably nothing going to be displayed there. All right, so we have that. Let's go ahead and make this the height of the container like 50. Yeah, that's a little bit better. And let's go ahead and have this row something like this. Okay, so we have this image. Let's go ahead and make this image a little bit smaller, so something like, I don't know, 100. Okay, that looks better. All right, so now we have this top header here. Okay, so we have this top header and it looks pretty good. Take a look. We got the circle image. It looks pretty good. Let's maybe align it, center, something like this. And this is going to have the name of the seller. Now, because we are querying our gigs, right? So if we go to our gigs table right here, we're not going to have the user for the gig. We're going to have the gig information, but we're not going to have the user. So this is our gigs table. And so obviously we just have gig information. Okay. We need to have a user ID here. We need to have the user responsible for this gig so we can pull up their information, and we don't have that here. And so what we want to do is we want to add another column that's going to help us to link to that users table. So we're going to click here, insert a column, user ID. Now the type of the user ID, typically it's going to be int8 for the tables that we create ourselves. But for the users table, I know that it's a different type. It's this UUID. And so that's what we're going to select here. Click save, and that's going to create that. And that way we can link it. So why is this UUID? Well, if you click here, you change to the auth schema here, and you click on users, you will see that this for the users table, the primary key, this is the primary key with the key symbol here. The type is UUID. It's not int8. Okay, so this is important to understand. So if we go back here, public, anytime you want to connect with the user, you want to make sure that you have the right key type, primary key. So now if we go into gigs, we are going to have the user who actually created this gig, right? The owner of that gig. Okay, let's go ahead and create another user. So let me go into authentication. Let's go ahead and create another user, and that way I'm the buyer, and then there's another seller. So I'm going to create another user right here. This is going to be rob@rob.com, Rob, and we're going to create this auto confirm. And now we have this user, and this is the user ID right here, Rob. So I can just click, I can copy this, go back to our tables here, go to gigs, and assign these two gigs to that new user just for testing. So I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. Okay, so now we have two gigs that I favorited because they're in gig save. So these are saved gigs, but they're owned by this Rob person. Okay, and so now when we need to display this information here, we need to create another view that pulls this data as well. So the view that we have right now, the query that we have right now, does not give us this data, and so we're gonna do that in a little bit. But right now, let me just finish, creating this page over here. So we need the title, we need the description, and then we also need the tiers as well, followed by tier description, right? So this is different. This is tier amounts, tier title, tier description, delivery days. All of this is going to be on a specific tier. Okay, so let's go back to our app. Let's create another container here, and let me just organize this real quick. So this is user container. This is going to be the title container, something like this. And then let's go ahead and clean this up, and let's go ahead and add a text. Go ahead and change the height as well, and let's go and see what they have. So their text is going to say the name of the gig. Okay, but let me go ahead and add a row here. I'm gonna wrap it in a row, wrap widget in a row. That way it's easier to organize, and you have more control over kind of how things are being displayed. Let's go ahead and change this font to a little bit bigger. Yeah, something like this. That looks pretty good. Now it has this division. We can kind of do that right now. We can just set it on this container here. All right, let's go ahead and give it some padding. This container padded from the top a little bit. All right, the next thing we want to do is we want to display the description. Okay, now this container has some padding, and so what we want to do is we want to have the right padding. We want to kind of do it correctly. And for that, what we can do is we can create another container. So what we can do is we can wrap this in a column. And then for this row, we can actually create some padding on it, right? So we can do something like this, and that's going to create this padding effect. So we can do it maybe 20. Okay, that looks better. And now we can create another row. And in this row, we are going to be displaying the description, the gig description. So add another text right here, and then also create some padding, maybe 20. Okay, so something like this. So we have the title, and then this is going to be the description. So let me put the title, and we have this information from our query, right? So we're querying this detail. We have this information in gigs, because if you go into gigs, we have name and we have description. Okay, but the problem is we don't have the data for the other stuff. So we will have to create another view, and then we will have to get data from this new view, and that is why I'm waiting to finish this page and then create the other view. Okay, so the next thing that we have is we have this whole thing here, and we have various tiers here. Okay, so we have the first tier, the second, and the third, followed by various information. And so what I'm going to do is, just to simplify things, I'm going to add a tab bar right here. And inside the tab bar, we are going to be displaying different tiers for that specific tier that we have. So we have this tab bar, and inside the tab bar, you have different tab bar views or pages. And inside each view, you will have specific information. So this is the second tab bar. So this is tab bar page. This is the first one. This is the second one here, and then this is the third one right here. Okay, so this is the name, this is the label, and then this is the data here. Okay, so let's go ahead and label these so that it's easier to understand. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say this is tier 1, this is tier 2, and this is tier 3. Okay, and this is tier 1, tier 2 view, and then tier 3 view. And so that way it's easier to kind of find the data that we're looking for. All right, so now we have this information. The next thing that we need to do is we need to create the view that's gonna give us all of this data. Okay, it's gonna give us everything, because not only do we need the gig information, but we also need the linked owner, right, the seller, and we also need the different tiers that the seller is selling in. And just to simplify things, I'm gonna have 3 tiers. I think 3 tiers is awesome. It's a nice kind of balance. You know, you don't want to have 1 tier, you don't want to have 20 tiers. So 3 tiers is great. And so the next thing I want to do is I want to create another table that's going to allow people to have various tiers. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this right now. We're going to create a new table. Now, the name of the table is going to be gig tiers. And the first column that we want to add is the gig ID. Now, the type is going to be int8, and we're going to create a relation, right? We're going to say to gig ID right here. We're going to click on save. All right, so now we have the gig ID. And the next thing that we need to do is we need to have the information for each of the 3 tiers. Okay, so I'm going to add another column, and this column is going to be called tier 1 name, and we are going to have the name here. It's going to be text. Next, we're going to have tier 1 description. This is going to be text. Next, we have tier 1 price, and this is going to be numeric. And we now need to do the same for the other tiers as well. So tier 2 name, this is going to be text. All right, so I went ahead and created all the information for all the 3 tiers that we're going to be storing for that specific gig ID. I'm going to hit save. It's creating that new table. All right, and this is our new table right here. So let's go ahead and create a couple of these tiers right here, so that we can display them. So I'm going to insert a new row right here. Now the gig ID, you can just click on select record and we can select a record. This is really nice. So I'm going to say for this translation gig, I'm going to be creating different tiers. So the first tier is beginner, not a lot of translation. And let's say this is $5 because it's Fiverr. Next one is intermediate, more translation, and the price is going to be, and last but not least is advanced, lots of translation, and the price is going to be 50. Okay, click save. And now we've just created a new record in our tiers table for that specific gig, which is the translation gig. So this is the gig right here, and you can even take a look at the referencing record. So this is really nice. When you link them together, you can easily browse and see exactly what's happening here. Okay, so this is our gig tiers table. Now the next thing that we need to do is we need to create a view that's going to pull the stuff from the gig, pull the stuff from the user, and pull the stuff from the tiers as well, so that we can display all of that on the same page. All right, so let's do that right now. I'm gonna come to the SQL editor right here, and we're gonna be creating a new query, and we can ask Supabase AI to build this query, and this is a really, really nice feature. Just simplifies things a lot. All right, so this is the prompt that I came up with. Create the view that displays all the gigs fields via the gigs table, adds all the data from the users table via user ID, adds all the data from the gig tiers linked via gig ID. All right, so let's see if that will work. We're gonna execute this prompt. All right, and this is what it came up with. Let's go ahead and accept this change. And it has created a statement that's going to create the view called gigs full view, which is the right name. And so it's getting all the fields from G, then all the fields from U, and then a bunch of fields from GT. Now, what is G, U, and GT? Well, it's telling us right here, gigs is G, auth users is U, and gig tiers is GT, and it's linking them. In other words, it's joining them on these IDs, and as a result, it should give us the data that we want. All right, so let's go ahead and run this SQL query, SQL statement to create this this view here, and it's telling us that column ID is specified more than once, so we need to change the column ID. So this GID, I'm just gonna say gig ID right here as gig ID. Let's try this again. Now it says created at. Let's go ahead and change that as gig created. Okay. Success, no rows returned. So this view has been created, and now if we go to our tables here, we should see this new view, this mega view that was created. So this is this gigs full view. Let's go ahead and try to view this thing to see if we are getting the actual data that we need. Okay, and there we have, and we have one record. Okay, so it's joining it, but it's only going to get the data. It's only going to display it in this view if all the data matches together. Okay, if that makes sense. And we have a couple of gigs, but only one gig has the tiers. Okay, so take a look at this. This is the gig ID. And now we have all of this information. And as you can see, we have lots of user information. And in fact, we probably don't need all of that user information. We might only need like the name. But we get the tiers. We get all the data that we need. And so let me go ahead and fix this view so that it's only giving us the information that we need. So I'm going to drop this view, and this is nice practice. Drop view gigs full view, and then we can recreate it immediately. And here what I'm going to do is, do we really need the user information? Let me say, and what do we need for the user information? For the user information, we don't even need that much. We may need, let me take a look at the user. We might only need like email, or so I'm just gonna say email so that we know we're getting the right user. That's it. I don't think we need a lot of data. So I'm gonna go back here, and I'm gonna go back here, and I'm gonna change this to email. Okay, that's it. So we don't need like all of this data. So let's go ahead and re-execute this. Running success. Let's go back here and let's go to this gigs full view. Okay, and so now we only have the email. So now we just have the data that we need. Okay, this is perfect. And in fact, this gigs full view, we can leave it at that, or we can have gigs detail view. I think I like gigs detail view a little bit better. So let's go ahead and rename this gigs detail view, re-execute this. And I'm going to also put this here. So next time it's going to be easier to execute this query because it's all the same. Gigs detail view, come back here, gigs detail view. Okay. So now we have a very, very nice view that gives us all the data that we need. So it's going to be super easy to get FlutterFlow to display all this data. It's going to be super, super easy. And so all we need to do is come back here, go to Supabase, get schema, and now we have this gigs detail view. And it gets us all of this data. Isn't, you know, sometimes I think that Supabase relational databases are more complex, but other times I think this is awesome. You know, my background isn't relational databases. Okay, so I started with relational databases, and this is exactly the data that we need. So now we can come back here and we can use this as our backend query. So instead of gigs detail view, and we have the filters. And what are we filtering on? We're filtering on the gig ID, right? So we're gonna say equal to the parameter gig ID. That's it. And we should get the information. And so now we can display it. So we need the avatar. We're not getting that, but we are getting the email. So let's go ahead and just list the email for now. So this row, we're just going to have this email right here. This is gig title. Gig name right here, description here, and now we can actually display the gig tiers, which is awesome. So this is the label. This is tier 1 name. This is tier 2 name. This is tier 3 name, and then we have the information, right? So we're gonna go to this tier 1. This is the text for the tier 1. This is gonna be the description, but there's gonna be more stuff, right? There's gonna be more stuff. It's not just gonna be this, right? So this is the text right here, but remember, if we come back here, there's all kinds of things. So we have the title, description, we have the price as well, delivery day. So we need to add a couple of other fields as well. So let's go ahead and just display this information here. And right now we only have the text, and so we can actually create another view here. Okay, so let's go ahead and wrap this in a column. Okay, so now we have a column. Let's go ahead and add another text. This is going to be the title here. So this is tier 1 name, and then description, tier 1 description, and then the price, right? So we can have another, and we're gonna fix it up in due time, right? We're gonna leave justified. We need to kind of arrange it, but that's the easy part, like I like to say. And then tier 1 price. And then because this is numeric, we can actually specify a number format. So we can format it as currency. So custom and display as currency. Isn't that nice? We can display that as currency, okay? And we obviously need to do it for the other ones, but let's go ahead and run this first just to make sure that it's displaying it correctly before we spend our time doing it for the other tabs here. But before we do that, let's make sure that we are passing something to this, right? We need navigation. So if we go to the home page, we have these recently saved gigs. Let's create on the card level, let's create a navigation, right? So we're going to say navigation to detail, and we need to pass the gig ID. And do we have the gigs ID? We have the gigs ID, of course. Okay, perfect. Let's go ahead and run our app and see if it's displaying the right data. All right, so this is our app right here. We have popular services. These are categories here, and we have this recently saved gig. Let's go ahead and click on it, and it's loading, but there's nothing being displayed, and that is because we forgot to have the right permissions. So if we go back to our app and we go to the tables, we are not able to get data from this table because we have not set the permissions on it. So if we go into our authentication right here, and we go into policies, you see all the tables have this all. Well, it's almost all. This one does not. And so we need to make sure we set this policy here, allow all true, review, save policy. And now all the tables have the right policies. Now we also want to check that the gigs detail view, we only have one gig, that it's the same gig that's also saved. So here in our detail view, we only have this gig too. We don't have that other gig. And so when we're trying to filter for that gig, we can't find that gig. So we want to make sure that we also are displaying the gig as the saved gig as well. So we're going to go back to gig saved. And here, as you can see, this is linked to the first gigs. And so here we are going to create a new role, although I'm saving another gig, right? Because I only have this first gig saved that's linked to my user ID, but I'm going to do that for the second gig as well. So this is going to be gig ID 2 and user ID. I can paste the user ID, but what's cool is I can actually select the records. All right, so I can select this one. And I can also select the second gig, which is really, really cool for quickly connecting them. So I'm going to select the second one, hit save. And now I have 2 gigs saved. Pretty much all the gigs that we have in the system, I have them saved. And that way I can click on the second gig and have it show me the information. So I have 2 gigs here saved. So let's say I click on this one, which is the one that has the tiers. I click on this one. And we are redirected. And there's the detail page. Okay, obviously we need to clean it up. But as you can see, everything is fine, right? So this beginner is the only one we have configured. It's showing the tiers. So now we can complete the same thing for these other 2 tiers, clean this up, and also display, you know, the images. And as you can see, email is here. We also need to make sure we have the avatar connected properly. So let's do that real quick. But as you can see, it works. So that's the good news. That's the hard part, right? Getting it all working together. The UI stuff is the easy part. So let's go back to our app right here and let's fix it up. So this image, let's go ahead and fix it up. This is going to be image. Gigs image. We don't have a field for the avatar. We might add that a little bit later. And then this thing is going to display whether this is an awesome seller or not, depending on some calculation, right? So this is not linked to anything, right? You can have this variable set automatically on your backend in Supabase, or you can calculate it on the front end with some, you know, data that you're getting about this user. So right now I'm just going to put something like, you know, awesome seller. Now, if you take a look at the compiled app here, we see that this body is it's overflowing. So we need to wrap these in a container. Okay, both of these, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this right here, and so I can wrap this in a container here. Okay, and I can do the same thing for this one, wrap in the container, and that way I can specify constraints. I can say, well, you can only go, you know, you can only be as wide as this, but I can give you more width, right? So I can wrap. Okay, so we're going to go to this container and I can say, well, I don't care about the height. I do care about the width. So let's say the width is, I don't know, 300, something like this. And the same thing here, this container, I don't care about the height, but the width is 300. Okay, so something like this, and that's going to look better. And now we can do the same thing for these containers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this in a column, wrap in the column, and column, I'm going to make it left justified. I'm going to duplicate this, going to do the same thing. And let's go ahead and configure these. So this is going to be tier 2 name. This is tier, and you can even type it, tier 2 description. And then this is tier 2 price. Okay. And let's go ahead and format it. Display as currency. And the same thing for that last tier. Wrap this in a column. Duplicate a bunch of these. All right, let's go ahead and left justified. And then I can just type tier 3. This is going to be name. This is description. And this is the price. Let's go ahead and format it. Display as currency. And there we have it. Okay, so let's go ahead and refresh our app so that we can get the new changes. All right, let's click on this, and there it is. Beginner, intermediate. Okay, we forgot to do this, did we? I don't think we did. Looks like it's there. Lots of translation, tab view 3. Yeah, it's there. Let's go ahead and give it another reload. Okay, click here. Okay, now it works. All right, there's some issue here that we're gonna take a look, see what's happening. We're gonna fix that. But so far, as you can see, our tables, our tabs work now, right? So we have the tabs working, everything working. It's just a question of making it aesthetically pleasing, okay? And one thing that we can do is we can have a button, right? So we can add a button here, and the button could say purchase now. Okay, so let's go ahead and wrap this button in a row so that we can center it nicely. Something like this. Okay, so this is here. Let's go ahead and do this. Same thing here. Let's add a button. Let's go ahead and wrap it in a row. Center the row. Okay, and last but not least, go ahead and do this view right here. Add a button, and let's go ahead and wrap this in a row. And let's go ahead and center it. Now, when the user clicks on it, what we can do is we can pass the ID of the record in this view, because the nice thing about this view is it has all the information. It has the name of the gig, the name of the tier. It has the price. So we can have all of that information to show them on the confirmation page, and we have the data to charge their credit card. So we have all of this. So all we need to do is pass the ID of the record in this view, not in a specific table, but in this view, and that's going to make it super easy to work with everything. Okay, so this is kind of done. It displays everything that we needed to display. We still need kind of the circle. And let me go ahead and add this circle right here real quick. Now, if we go to our users table and we take a look at the definition, just with a quick scan, I do not see anything that's kind of an avatar. So there's no image, there's no avatar, nothing like that. And so because this is a read-only table here, what you can do is you can create another table that's going to have additional information about the user. And so what you want to do is you want to stay in this table editor, go to public, create new, and here you can create another table, users extra. Okay, and what you can do is you can add a column, and this is going to be avatar. And here you're going to link to the user. Okay, so we're going to say user ID. We're going to link this right here, and we're going to go to auth, link to this user. And what we want to do is we want to link to this UID, but we haven't set the type. That's why it's not letting us. Here we have the type, and now we should have no problem doing it. We're going to select auth, and we have ID right here. Save, and now we have another table with some extra information about the user, because if you want to store a bunch of things but you can't do it in that users that initial users table, because it has its own kind of data, it's a good idea to do it separately. Instead of modifying, kind of changing the data of that given table. So it's a lot better to do it like this. And so now we've created another table. We linked it back to that original table. We're going to save this table. Oh, forgot. We're going to give this text right here. We're going to save this table here. And so now we have this user extra. And so now what I can do is I can give this user or any user some extra information. So I can say insert a row, and I don't have to worry about it. So I can give this user an avatar. Head over to this website, and we can just select a random face. Let's say it's this user right here. We can just save it, go back to our storage, go to our images bucket. All right, so we uploaded this image, click on this image, get URL, and go back to our tables here, user extra, and then we can create a new role, avatar right here, and then the user ID. Let's say we want to link it to my user, and I believe it's this one right here. And let's go ahead and link it to the other user as well, because that user is the one that is the owner of that gig. So we want to display the avatar. So I'm going to add another row, same avatar. We can change it later, and I'm going to select this user right here. And now what we want to do is we want to make sure that we have the data from the user as well. So we're going to change this view here to pull the data. So we're going to say join user extra EU on G user ID EU user ID, and we can also display it here. Here we can add this other field here, and we can say avatar. Let's go ahead and rebuild this query here. All right, so it looks like it created a new view. And now if we go back to our tables and views and take a look at this detail view, we should have this avatar being pulled up as well. So there's email and there's the avatar. Okay, so now we've created the new view with the avatar. And so now we can go back to our app, Supabase, get schema, and now we have this gigs detail view, and now it has this avatar. Okay, how cool is that? Go back here, come back here, click on the avatar, and then we can click here, gigs detail view, and we have the avatar. And so now it's going to be the user's avatar. And so let's go ahead and reload the app and see if it's showing up correctly. All right, so this is our app. Let's go ahead and see if it's going to display everything correctly. Click here. And as you can see, the image is showing up here. We have all of this here, and then we have this purchase. That's going to be redirecting the user to the purchase page. Okay, and so as you can see, everything looks really good. We're pulling the correct data. We still need to fix it up a little bit, make it a little bit nicer, but that's really easy to do. All right, so the next thing that I want to do is I want to implement search functionality. So if you take a look at the screenshot right here, this is that homepage screenshot. You see people can search. They can search for specific gigs by typing in a specific keyword, by describing that gig somehow. So if I type NFT, this is the results I'm going to get. So I'm going to get some related results. I'm going to get some specific categories, gig categories, and then the search results. So that is what we want to implement right now. So let's go ahead and do the UI part, and then let's do the backend part as well. So let's come back here, and here we want to have a container that's going to display the search input here. Right, so I'm just going to clean these things up, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add let's add a container. We'll put it up on top, and let's add a text input field here, and let's set this container. Let's remove the width, let's remove the height, and I want to remove this underline. Now the idea here is that the user is going to enter their search query here in this box and then press enter. And then when they press enter, we're going to have an action that's going to execute. Now in Fiverr here, when they press enter, they're redirected to another page. And on this page, they are presented with the list of items that they're searching for. So this is the home page. They enter NFT, for instance, and they're basically redirected, and they have like related results, some categories, gig categories, and then the actual results here. So it's a different flow. It's not being displayed in line. It's doing on another page, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing. So we go to our app and we select the field here. If you click on add an action and you type search, you are presented with various options here. So mainly you can do simple search or Algolia search. Now we don't have Algolia configured. If you select simple search and you click here, you can only select strings. Okay, so if we were using Firebase's Firestore, you could have searched directly on a Firestore collection or Firestore documents. But seeing how we're using Supabase here, we can only search on strings, and strings are not good for us, because what are we going to do with strings? We want to search on actual gig records, right? So this is not going to work for us. And so we're going to delete this. We're going to delete this action. And what we're going to do is we are going to redirect to another page. And on the other page, we are going to be doing the search. Okay, so we're going to create a new page here, new page, and I'm just gonna create a blank page, search results, create page, and this is gonna be our page. Let's say it's gonna say search results, something like this. And on this page, we're gonna be doing the searching. Now, the other problem that we have is if we go back to our other pages, right, we're doing like a query here. Let's say we're doing this query. We're doing this query from the view, everything is good. The problem is we can't filter it, right? So if we select, we want to filter by name, we only have equal to, not equal to, greater than. We can't really do like a search. We can't really do like a contains or something like that. And this is not going to work for us, right? Because it's looking at different elements. Now, Supabase supports some very powerful searching features. It's just you can't use them inside of FlutterFlow. But thankfully, there's a bunch of APIs that you can use to access your database directly, and you have these powerful features. So you can do is equal, not equal, greater than. So all of this is supported by FlutterFlow, but we can also do matches. Column matches a pattern, column matches a case insensitive pattern. So there's a lot of, very useful searching capabilities, right? And so if you go back to our database here and you scroll down and you go into API docs here and you select your the view or the table that we're going to be searching on. And I think a good view to search on is this gigs detail view. Okay, so we're going to be using this gigs detail view right here, and you select bash here instead of JavaScript. You have these specific requests that you can use directly. So for instance, this is selects various things, but if you scroll down, you can actually do filtering, right? There's all these read rows, and then you can do these filtering, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing. Now you want to select your key right here. We're going to be using this anon key here. And now we are given a specific operation that we can filter. And this means that we can filter on specific fields exactly how we want. It's very, very powerful. And so let's go back into our app and let's create an API request that's going to be used specifically for filtering or search. So we're going to go into API calls, create a new API call. This is going to be called search query. And what we're going to do is we're going to copy the stuff what we got. Now I saved my request here and I'm going to paste it here. So as you can see, we're specifying gigs detail view. We're specifying name that we want to query on, and we're saying I like. This is case insensitive. We don't care about case, uppercase, lowercase, doesn't matter. And we're searching for a specific query. Okay, in this case, I have translate here. But this is going to be a variable. So I'm going to add a variable. This is going to be here. I'm going to add a call, and then I can use this right here. It's going to be search string. And here we're selecting essentially all the values. You can limit this if you want, but this is fine for testing. Now we need to add a couple of headers. Okay, these are the headers, API key. This is going to be your anon key. Okay, the one that it's in your dashboard config, your project config here. Gonna add this as well. As you can see, this is exactly what this request is, right? And then we need that last header, this range header here. Go back here, add this one last header here, and click save. Okay. Now let's go ahead and test it out. Let's see if it works. Response and test. And let's say we're searching for the field translate. So we want all the gigs where name has the word translate. And if we go into our Supabase here and we go into the main screen here and we select the project and we're going to go to the table editor and we load this detail view here, we have one gig that's active right now that has gig tiers and everything is set up. That's why it's being displayed here. And as you can see within the name, you see the word translate. So potentially when we run this here, we should be able to get that gig there. So we're going to do test API call. And guess what? We get this exact gig. We get the search results. So now, if I go into recommended, I can select the fields that I want to kind of display. But right now, it's fine. I'm just going to hit save and save this request. And so now we have a search query API that, given a particular search string, is going to go out and actually query the data. Okay. Let's go back inside of our app. Let's go into this UI here and let's configure the navigation to the search detail page. Okay. Click here, navigate to search results. We need to pass a parameter. This is going to be search query string required, of course. And now we can pass a search query and now we can widget state input search here. Okay, so now we're passing something. Now on this page here, what we can do is at the top level, we can execute that API call. Backend query, API call, search query, and we can actually add the variable, right? Search string, and this is going to be search query here, which is the parameter. Okay. So now when this page loads, it executes that API call and it should have this data available everywhere. Okay. So now what we can do is we can create a list view and display the data. All right. Let's just test it out. Let's just create a very, very simple list view. And this list view is going to be based off a result. And let's see, this is the search query result here. And here we can just do JSON body. Okay, we're getting this JSON body and then we can say items, confirm, and then we can pull out the items that we need, right? So for this text right here, we can just do search item and then we can do JSON path. And I think we can just do name. I believe name is one of them. Okay, yeah, it should work. All right. So let's go ahead and run it and see if it works. Okay, so let's see if that works. Let's go ahead and run our app. All right, so here's the app and we have a nice search input field here. And let's type translate. Okay, press enter and guess what? It redirects it and it displays that 1 gig. Okay, so even though we couldn't do it the FlutterFlow way, right? FlutterFlow cannot do the filtering using Supabase. We were able to do it using the API way, and this is perfectly fine. Sometimes that's exactly what you have to do. All right, so this functionality works, which means this is the hard part is done now. And now we need to make it a little bit nicer. We need to display the nice UI, maybe display some categories, things like that. And thankfully, because we have all of this data in that view, right? So if I test this view right here, you see we have all of this data we have everything that we need. It's going to be very, very easy to display this in a nice kind of UI way. So let's do that right now. All right, so right now, let's go ahead and configure our page here. Let's fix it up. Let's make it all nice and beautiful. And we are going to be mimicking this search results page. Okay, so we have this search input field here again, which is pre-filled with the search query. Next, we have some related results. We have the gig types, the user types, or I don't know, some filters here. We have the categories of the results, and then we have the actual results in a kind of this list format with these cards here. So let's go ahead and start here, and then we're gonna create some of these other features as well. So we're gonna go back into FlutterFlow, and what I'm gonna do here is I already have my list view here. Okay, so all I need to do is I need to make it nicer. So instead of just the text, I'm gonna get I'm gonna have a container here. We're gonna replace text. And inside the container, what do we want to do? Well, first of all, we have this image here. We have this image, and then we have some text. So this is a row with 2 columns right away, right off the bat. So we're going to come here, and we're going to add a row. And inside the row, we're going to have a column and another column. I'm going to just duplicate this, and let's go ahead and let's go. So we have this container here. We don't really need the width and height because it's going to take up the amount of the inner elements here. It's going to expand or contract automatically. And for this row, let's see if we can center it, maybe something like this. And this column here, this needs to take up the entire space. Now here what we have is almost kind of 50-50, right? So we have this thing taking up almost half, and then this one taking the rest. And so what we can do here is give this maximum, and then the image is going to take how much it needs, essentially, right? So for the image, we're going to add an image here, and this image is going to take exactly what it needs. So let's say it needs 100 by 100. Perfect. And now we have something like this, maybe even a little bit bigger. Let's say 125, 25. Okay. And then this is going to take the rest, which is exactly what we want. Now let's go ahead and do this one. So here we have we have some like a card here, a column with 3 rows, 1, 2, 3. Essentially, that's all they are, 3 rows. Let's go ahead and do that. So we have a column, we have a row, we have a row, and we have a row. Now, the first row is the ratings, right? We're not storing any ratings or reviews as of yet, okay? We're not doing that yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a text, and I'm just going to put some dummy data. Okay, I'm going to show you how to do that later. So I'm just going to put 4.8, 125, something like this. This one right here is going to be the name of the gig. Okay, so this is going to be the name of the gig. And then what do we have? Then we have the price, which is right justified. So this is going to be the price, and I'm just going to write justified right here. Perfect. Okay, that looks awesome. Looks really, really nice. I really, really like that. So we can also do something like this. All right, and then for the name, let's go ahead and fill it in because we have that information, search response, custom path, name right here. Now, this right here is going to be the price of the first tier, right? So this is going to be the lowest price tier, and that's exactly what we have here. It says here from 10. So that's assuming the lowest price tier. In our example, this is going to be the first tier. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that as well. The response, custom, and we're going to say tier 1 price. Okay, so something like this. All right, so that is what we have so far. Let's take a look. Let's give it a little bit of padding. So we can pad on this row level. Let's do 10. Now, another thing that we can do is we can wrap it inside of its own internal container. And then on that container, we can do some borders. So I'm going to remove this here. We're going to do a padding on this container, and we can do a border radius of, let's say, 10. Okay, there's the border radius. And then on the row level, we can do more padding, right? So let's say something like this, or maybe, yeah, that looks good. Maybe a little bit more, and that way we have a really nice effect. Okay, so something like this. Okay, that's starting to look better. And let's take a look at this column. We can have a kind of a left padding, something like this. Okay, that's kind of starting to come together. So let's go ahead and run the app, and let's make sure everything is displayed correctly. So let's go ahead and start a new testing session. All right, so here's our app. Let's go ahead and type translate, which is the search term for the gig that we are trying to find. We're looking for a translation gig. And if I press enter, it's going to redirect and it's going to do a search. All right, so we got here one result, but this is not correct. So we're probably not fetching the right fields correctly. So we're going to double check the fields. And we also need to make sure that this image is not overflowing the constraints inside this container. So let's go ahead and check to make sure that we are setting up the query correctly. Let's do a test on the API. All right, so this should be an underscore, right? This should be tier 1 name and underscore tier 1 price, right? So let's go ahead and fix that to make sure that it is correct. Tier 1 price right here, and this is the name of the gig. And as you can see, the image is too big. It's 125. Let's make it a little bit smaller. Let's do 100. Okay, let's do it to something like 75. Okay, that looks a little bit better. That looks a lot better now, right? And in fact, you can even remove the height here, and the image is going to fit in perfectly. I can make it 100 by 100 and it's automatically going to fit in. All right, so let's go ahead and reload the app and let's see what happens. All right, let's type translate, press enter. Now we're still getting null here, and the reason we're getting null is when we are specifying this element, we are going off directly search query response. We should not be doing that. We should be going off items, right? We should be going off items. And then that's going to find us, because search query response is a list of items, right? We are getting individual items, but we need to go through items right here. So we're going to change this to items. We're going to put tier 1 price, and that should work. Let's go ahead and reload this. And now we should see the actual data being filled in correctly. All right, there's the app. Let's go ahead and search. All right, and there's the app. And as you can see, now the data is showing up correctly. We have the name of the gig and we have the price. We still need to format the price, and I'm going to show you how to do that shortly. But right now, we are getting the right search results. So let's continue working on this. Let's go ahead and add this input field, and that's really easy to do. We can just go over here, we can go into column, we can create another container, and let me rearrange this, put it right there, and remove the width, the height, the text field, and let's go ahead and create like a nice border around it. So I really like this outline. Okay, that looks better. Let's do a little bit of top padding from the top. Perfect. Let's do a little bit of padding on the container, on the text field right here, something like this. Okay, perfect. This label we're going to remove because I only want the initial value. Where's this label right here? And I just want to put in an initial value, and that's going to be the search query parameter that we have there. So that's the initial value right there. Now we need to make sure that when somebody clicks on it, it's going to redirect to the detail page. Okay, so let's do that now. Let's expand this. Let's do it on the container. Over here, add an action, navigate to detail, and let's pass the gig ID because we have that. And let me go ahead and do that from the items JSON path. And I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, let me double check. Yeah, it's gig underscore ID. There it is. Gig underscore ID right here. And that's going to load details. Okay, so let's go ahead and reload and see how that looks. Okay. Translate. There it is. Click on it, and there's the detail. Okay, and then you can kind of purchase the right tier for you, the right type of gig. So as you can see, that works perfectly. Really, really nice. Now there's still a couple of things that we can improve on. Another thing that I want to do is I want to display the categories, right? So in case the user just wants to click on the categories and look at gigs, they can do that, okay? But the problem is we are not getting any categories in this query, right? So if we have this gigs detail view, if you go to the definition, we are not pulling any categories, right? Now let's take a look if that gig has any categories for it anyways. We have these categories here, and we have categories view, but we don't have the actual table that links gigs to categories. Now, assuming that a gig could be in multiple categories, we can't just add a field on gigs, right? Because anytime you have many-to-many or one-to-many relationship, you need to add another table, okay? So let's go ahead and create a new table. This is going to be gig categories, and we are going to be adding a couple of columns. So this is going to be gig ID int 8, and then we're going to link it to gigs ID, and we're going to add a column. This is going to be category ID. Okay, and so that way we can have as many gigs linked to as many categories as we want, essentially. Let's give it a int 8 here, and then we are going to say this is linked to categories ID, okay? And that way, you're going to have your gig ID, category ID there, and you can assign it, and you can look up this table and get category information. So let's go ahead and save this table right here. All right, so now we have this gig categories here, and let's go ahead and add a category gig linking, essentially putting a gig into a specific category. So I'm going to say insert row, and I'm going to pick a gig, and I'm going to pick this translation gig. And for the category, I'm going to select translation. Makes sense. And so now this gig has a category information attached to it. And so when we have this gigs detail view, right, if you click here, we can modify it to pull up different categories. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that right now. Let's come in here. We have this gigs detail view right there, and let's go ahead and change that. So update the view to include category name from the category table. Okay, let's go ahead if that works. Let's execute our prompt here and let's see what happens. All right, and this is the response. And as you can see, it's getting the name from category name, which is perfect. And then it's also doing the joins, right? So it's doing on gig categories by the ID, and it's also linking on categories. So let's see if that works. Let's accept the change and let's go ahead and run this query. Let's go. First, we're going to drop that query, gigs detail view. Okay, let's go ahead and rerun it. Okay. So now we've created this new view here. Let's head over to our tables, take a look at this view, and let's see if it has the right categories. All right, so we have this, and I think our category, there it is, translation. Okay, so now we're getting categories. So that AI element is really, really nice. That GPT-3 or whatever they're using in the backend, it works really, really well. So now we have the category here. And so what this means now is that if we get data from detail view, we're going to get a list of categories and we can list them in the search results. So let me show you how to do that. So let's go back into our app. Here, get schema, refresh our schema, and this is our gigs detail view, and now we have category name. Okay, so now we have category name, and so now if we do that API call, we're gonna get the name of the category, right? So now we have category name. So if we have a lot of results, we can get the name here, the list here, and so what we can do here is we can generate a list of categories and have a list view here that allows people to select categories. And categories are important because we're gonna have another separate view with category flow. So they're gonna select different categories and they can click on it and see the list of gigs in that category. So let's go ahead and create that list container, that list view that displays the categories. So let's go ahead and fix this up right here. I'm going to add another container. Inside, I'm going to do a list view and I'm going to drag it right there like this. Perfect. And let's go ahead and rename it. This is our category. This is our search. And this is our main list. Okay, this category list, let's go ahead and delete the height. Now let's go ahead and fix this up. Let's go change our height, maybe make it a little bit not as tall, like 50, maybe 75. We're gonna expand it all the way. Okay, that looks really nice. Now let's do a little bit of padding on the list view here. So something like this. That looks really, really clean. Okay. That looks good. Now I want to test out the categories, but before I can do that, remember we only have one gig with one category. We need multiple to make sure that they're gonna display properly. So I want to create another gig. I want to create the tiers and everything there, and that way we can have multiple gigs with multiple categories. So let's go ahead and do that. So in our gigs detail view right here, we are only seeing one gig. Okay, and just translation here. So what we need to do is we need to create another tier for another gig and another category for it so that it can be in this gigs detail view. So let's go into gigs. Now in the gigs, in the main gigs table, we have 2 gigs. So I will edit your YouTube videos for you. But this first gig with the gig ID 1, it doesn't have any tiers, right? So we need to create tiers for it, and we need to make sure that everything is done for it. Otherwise, it's not going to appear here, which is kind of what we want. And And so I'm going to create another record here. And this gig ID is going to be this other gig ID. This is this edit videos here. Tier name is, let's say, I'm just going to put tier 1 description. Just going to keep it really, really simple. 10, tier 2 description, 20, tier 3, and this is 50. And we have that, so it should appear in our gigs detail view. So let's go ahead and refresh that. Okay, let's take a look. So it's not appearing here, and that's because it's missing some data from the other tables. That's important. So if you take a look at the definitions, we are probably missing user extra because we need to make sure that all the data lines up here. So let's take a look and let's make sure. So if we go into categories, we have video editing. So if we go to this gig right here, you need to make sure that everything, it has all the information here. So let's take a look. The user ID is the same, so that's not an issue. It has the tiers. It has user extra here. So if we go into user extra, it should have that because that's used for the avatar. Okay, so these are the user extras that is there. What it's missing is the gig categories. Okay, it doesn't have a category assigned to it correctly. So we're going to add another row here. And this is going to be the gig ID. This is this edit your videos category ID video editing. Okay. Now, once we add that, it should have all the data, hopefully. Let's wait for this record to be added. Let's go into gigs detail view, and there it is. Okay, so now it has all the data, and so it's being displayed correctly. And so now we can go back to our app, try this API call with multiple records now, right? Very, very important. Test this API call, and we're still getting one record, and that is because we are searching for translation. But let's say we modify the name so that it's matched by both, so that the search query matches both records here. So we have will, so we can search for the word will. Okay, so we can come in here and I'm gonna put will. So now we should get two results, and we are getting two results. And so now if you go into recommended, go into category name here, we have a list of categories, which is what we're going to be getting. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we select this, come back to select it, and give it a name. And we're going to say categories. And so now we have access to a list of categories that we can use, right? So let me show you what we can do. So we can go back to our app here. And in this list view, we can load it up with category names, right? So, and here we're going to select categories, right? Categories here, and just put category item or category name, be more specific. Okay. And then this list view here is going to give us a list of categories there. Okay, so let's go ahead and add just something to show and make sure that the list view is actually horizontal, not vertical. Okay, perfect. And let's give it some padding so that it's not all squished together. Okay, perfect. Okay, so this should display the categories for the search results. So let's go ahead and reload the app or start a new session. All right, so here's our app. Now let's say if we search for something that's going to match multiple gigs. So I'm going to type will and I'm going to press enter. Okay, redirect, and as you can see, it matches both items here. Now we need to make sure these are formatted correctly, but two are displayed because it essentially matched both. And as you can see, they're displayed here for us. Let's go ahead and fix that right now. From this text right here, we're going to go into category item, no further changes, category item, and that's it. Okay, so let's go ahead and reload this. All right, now let's say I put will, press enter, and there are the names of the categories. Now there's still a few things that we can do with them. We can put them in alphabetical order. We can do a bunch of other things, and we will do all that. But right now I want to kind of fix this thing. I want to make sure that it expands all the way. And so what I'm going to do is instead of having text, I'm going to have a container there. I'm going to have a container. We're going to replace it. Then I'm going to add a text. And for the text, we're going to do category name, no further changes. And you can do a little bit of padding on the text. So maybe like 10. Okay, something like this. And you can also stylize the container itself, maybe with a box shadow, something like that. Let's go ahead and reload this, see how our app is shaping up. Okay, type will. Okay, and there we have it. Okay, so it's a little bit nicer. And when you have more of these, you have more gigs, more categories, it's going to fill up the rest of this row, and it's going to be scrollable as well. And so obviously you can click on any of these and it will it will redirect you to the detail. Now, there are a couple of things I want to fix. I want to make sure that this is constrained, this name of the gig here, and I also want to make sure that this is actually going to be formatted as currency, okay? And there's a little trick to that. So let's do one thing at a time. This thing right here, I want to make sure that it's actually constrained, and for that we need to put it into a constraint type widget. We're going to wrap it inside a container, and this container is going to have a set width. So we're going to remove the height, but the width, it may be 200 pixels, something like this. And now how do you make sure that this is actually formatted as a number? Well, the reason it's not is because this is just JSON, right? It doesn't know what this is. And you want to wrap this whole thing inside a code expression here. So we're going to add an argument. The argument is going to be an integer. We're going to be passing this argument, and this argument is going to come straight from the item, right? So this item, JSON path, this is our item, and the return type is going to be an integer. This is going to be our var1, and because it's going to be an integer, we have an option to format it as a number, right there. And so we're going to say custom formatting displays as currency. Okay, now this is going to be displayed as a currency. And so as you can see, this app is shaping up really, really nicely. Now, the next thing that I want to work on is this category flow. Okay, and it's a little bit complex. It's a little bit more complex than you think. So what's happening here is we have these top level categories, so like graphics and design, digital marketing, writing and translation. And if we scroll down, then you have these child categories here. And then when you click on the category like logo and design, you get your familiar the gig view, right? And this is the view that we used for the search screen, so we can replicate this without the search bar. And so what's tricky here is this is a two-level design. This is a multi-level design where we have a kind of the main category, the big category, and then there's a bunch of subcategories that we want to show that fall under that main categories, and these subcategories are clickable, and then the user goes and they see the list of gigs in that specific categories. Now, how do you implement that with Supabase? Well, the way you do it is we have here this categories table, and what I decided to do is, and I explained this in the initial stages, but chiefly what we're doing here is we have this parent ID field here, right? So if you go to data definition, you can see that we have this parent ID, and the purpose of this parent ID is twofold. One is to specify what kind of category this is. Is this a top level category, or is this going to be a child category? So if parent ID is null, then there is no parent, that it's a top level category. If parent ID has something, then it's part of that, it's a child category of that parent category. Now, the gigs that we're going to be assigning to categories, they're only going to be children. They're only going to be assigned to categories that are child categories. Okay, so here, technically, this is never going to work because in our gig categories, we have gigs assigned to these categories, but these are top level categories. Okay, so we have to kind of change some things around. And this is important because when you're displaying the data, you want to display the parent category and then a bunch of children, then the parent, then a bunch of children for that parent. Kind of what they're doing here, okay? So let's go back to our database and let's clean this up. So these should be children of something. So these should have a parent ID. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create two more top level categories, and these categories I'm going to assign them to top level categories. Okay, so let's go ahead and create kind of this big category for video editing, right? So I'm going to add another row here, and this is going to be video everything. Okay, so that we know this is a top level category, video work. And no, there's no parent ID, and the image URL we'll add that later. We'll add that later. And I'm going to do another one for translation job. So text-based things, right? I'm going to add a row, not a column, but a row, and we're going to say text everything. Okay, so video everything, text everything, kind of makes sense. And no parent ID, I'm going to add the image later. And for the parent ID, I can have a reference that's linked back to one of these records. And first I want to edit this column right here, and I want to add a foreign key relation. Okay, so I'm going to add it back to this category ID here. Okay, saved it here. And now what I can do is I can edit it and I can select the records, right? So this video editing and translation is going to be link to video everything and text everything respectively, right? So video editing is video everything. Translation is going to be text everything. So now we have 4 categories, and these 2 categories without the parent ID is these top level categories, okay? And these are children categories, right? So we can get the top level categories if we need to, and we can also get the children categories for specific parent categories if we need to as well. Now let's go ahead and start building the UI. So here we are back inside FlutterFlow. Let's create a new page. Let's create a blank. I'm just gonna put categories, create page. Let's take a look. So we're gonna create a couple of pages, right? So we need like 3 pages: top level categories, subcategories, and then the actual list of widgets. Okay, so this is going to be our top level categories. So very, very easy. Come back here. Let's do a list view. Here, let's put categories. Here, let's do a list view. Let's put a container. And how are we going to do that? So we have an image. Then we have the main category, and then maybe a couple of subcategories. Let's just do main category right now. And so what are we going to do? We're going to have a row, and we're going to have 2 columns. Okay, now we don't have any images yet for top categories. We're going to add them later. But the most important thing is the structure, right? So let's go ahead and fix this image, something like this, because we don't have a container, and that is why it needs to have some boundings. Let's make it really small. And this thing is going to contain text. Okay, so something like this, and this column is gonna take up the rest of the space. Let's go ahead and wrap it inside of a row. All right, looks good. Let's go ahead and maybe, yeah, let's go give it some padding. Maybe 10. Okay, that looks better. Yeah, maybe give it a little bit of padding. All right, let's make it this a little bit bigger. Okay. All right, so these are going to be our categories. Now let's go into list view and let's feed these our categories. Come in here, Supabase query. Now, which table do we want to do? We can just do categories, right? We can just do categories. And what we need to do is we need to create a filter where parent ID is null. Right, parent ID is null, and unfortunately we don't have a way to do it. Right, equal to, not equal to, less than, greater than. We don't have that option. Right, we don't have that option of just getting the list of categories where parent ID is null. And so what we need to do is we need to go into Supabase and we need to create a view that gives us a list of top level categories. And so let's go and create this view, create view that displays categories where parent ID is null. Okay, let's try this. It's thinking. Okay, accept the change, and there it is. So from categories, and it's giving us all the fields. Okay, so let's go ahead and create this view, categories parent view. We're gonna create this view right here. And now if we come back here, we have this categories parent view. Okay, and as you can see, it's only displaying top level categories. Okay, there's a description, which is fine. In fact, we need a description. We can actually display this description, but everything else, this is null. And this image URL is null because we haven't set the images, and that's fine. And so now we can display these categories in our list view. Come back here and let's go ahead and add so we have this column. Let me duplicate this row here, and this is going to be the description. Right, so this is the name and this is the description. Okay, let's make it a little bit smaller. Okay, so something like this. Now let's go ahead and feed these, and let's refresh our schema. Get schema. It's gonna overwrite, and if we go into categories parent view, we are going to be seeing just top level categories. So if we come back here, we have this list view, add backend query, Supabase, and categories parent view, all categories per. Okay, so now we can just display. So these are our top level categories, and if we had the image, we would display the image as well. So let's go ahead and run the app, but before we do that, this needs to show the NavBar. We are just setting up the NavBar. It needs to have the NavBar. In fact, everything needs to have a NavBar. So let's create a homepage to have a NavBar. Okay, so now we have a homepage and we have categories. Let me give it another icon, maybe something with categories. Oh, there's categories. Oh, nice. It even has a category icon. Detail doesn't need categories. Homepage, and yeah, that's it. Search results doesn't need categories. Okay, so let's go ahead and restart our session. All right, so here's our app, and we are getting an error here on the homepage. And if we go back to our app, the reason we're getting an error is because we have all of these categories here, right? This is this categories view right here, but some of them don't have images. Okay, that is why we are getting an error, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy these images here just so that they have something there. And let's go ahead and reload our app. All right, so here's our app, and we don't have an error anymore. And as you can see, we are displaying all the categories because we need to set a filter to just display the child categories in this case, so that we can click on them and see the gigs. Now let's go ahead and click on the categories. See, this works perfectly, and this was not really practical to do in FlutterFlow because we needed to make sure that the value is set to something. Of course, we could have set the value to some 0 or something else and just queried by 0. But this is another way of doing it. Okay, so now we have these parent categories. And the next thing that we need to do is we need to display these child categories under them. And that's relatively easy to do because now we can simply query categories table directly using the ID for these child categories as a filter. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that right now. So we're going to wrap this in a column. And now we have here a column. We can collapse this container and we can add another list view. Okay, so now we have this list view under this container. Okay, so let's go ahead and expand this one right here. Okay, so that it's all visible. And in fact, we can probably set a height, so maybe 100. I think 100 is nice. And so for this list view, we can display a container, and inside the container, we are going to display the specific child category here. Okay, so this container, we're gonna clean it up a little bit, delete the height, delete the width, give it some padding, so something like this. And now we can have a list view that goes off this parent category. All right, so add a backend query, Supabase query, we're gonna be doing categories, and we're gonna add a filter where parent ID is equal to, guess what? It's going to be this parent view. Okay, so this ID here. Okay, so now parent ID is going to go off that main top level category. Okay, we're going to say confirm, and then we can just set the value to our categories name here. Okay, so this is going to display the name, the child categories for this main category. Let's go ahead and reload this. All right, there we go. Come in here, and guess what we see? Text everything, translation, video everything, video editing. So as you can see, our hierarchy structure works perfectly. It does exactly what we want. The last thing that we want to do is we want to create another view that will display the gigs for that specific category. And thankfully, we already have a view that kind of does it. Search results, right? So I'm going to take search results, I'm going to duplicate it, I'm going to rename it, and this is going to be gigs list, or just list gigs. And we're going to remove the query here from this list of gigs. We're going to remove these categories because, well, it's going to be only one category. And what we want to do is we want to have a filter that's filtered by that specific category ID. And so instead of a search query, we're going to have a category ID here, which is an integer. It's going to be required, and we're going to remove the search query because we don't need it anymore. And let's take a look at our query here. It's not going to be an API call. It's going to be Supabase query. And what we're going to essentially do is we are just going to query the actual gigs in that specific category ID. So what can we query? Let's go back here. We have this gigs detail view, which is awesome. Can we query that by category ID? Let's take a look. We have category ID, but we are not displaying it here. Okay, so we have category name, but it's better to do it using category ID. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this and we are going to go back to SQL editor, and I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to drop it first, drop gigs detail view, drop view gigs detail view, and then I'm going to recreate it. But I want to make sure that we actually get the category ID here, right? The CID, I want to make sure that it's there. This is this category C. So I want to make sure that CID is displayed as well. So I'm going to place it right here, CID as category ID, and let's go ahead and re-execute this. No rows returned, success. This is our gigs detail view. Let's go ahead and see if it's actually doing it. Let's run our view. All right. And we have category IDs, 2 and 1, right? So if you go back into categories, 2 and 1, right? So these are the right categories. Okay. So now we can go back to our app and we can refresh our schema, Supabase, get schema. Okay. Now we have these categories. We have this gigs detail view, and we have category ID here. Okay, so we can filter on that category ID that we are being passed. Okay, so this is our main query here. This is going to be Supabase query, gigs detail view, filter by category ID equals to category ID page parameter. Okay, so now we have a list of gigs for that specific category, and we need to make sure that we're passing it correctly. So I'm going to go into categories here, and I'm going to make this clickable. This container I'm going to make clickable. I'm going to do a navigate to list gigs. I'm going to pass the category ID here, categories row, category ID. And here what we want to do is we want to take this backend query here. We want to copy it, and we just want to feed it in our main list. Okay, we're going to come here, paste this backend query, and remove it here because we don't need it at that level anymore. And now we can just display the right fields, right? So these are our gigs, gig detail view name. This is the number. We can remove this and just display the price directly. Well, it's going to be from certain price, which is tier 1. We're going to format it as a number, as a currency, custom formatting, display. Okay, what do we have here? Passing. And this thing here, when you click on it, it's going to redirect to the detail view. But except here, we're not going to be passing this gig ID. We're going to be passing this gig ID right here. All right, no issues. Let's go ahead and reload our app, and let's see if it works. All right, here's the app. Let's go into our categories. Let's click on translation. We're not seeing anything. Let's double check to make sure that we are in fact displaying the right categories. Oh, the issue is we're not passing category ID for some reason. Let's go ahead and pass it correctly. This right here is this list view here, and we're querying categories. So we need to be passing this category ID here from categories ID. Okay, now we're passing category ID. Let's go ahead and reload our app. All right, here's the app. Let's go into our categories, translation, and we're seeing the category ID, and this is our translation. We can click on it, and we are in the description, in the detail page here. And our detail page needs to have always on NavBar. So let's go ahead and do that right now before we forget. And we need to change search results here because this is a category view. So we're gonna go to list of gigs and change this, and here we can put a list of gigs. Let's go ahead and reload this real quick. All right, so now we have the category view, and we also have the list of gigs for that specific category, right? So this is translation, all the translation stuff. And this is video editing, right? This is the video editing gigs here. Now, the next thing I want to work on is this orders screen, right? So we have these manage orders, and we have a list of orders here. And if you click on the order, it's going to show you different status changes, right? So when you submit the order, when the person begins working on the order, when they complete the order, they might ask for some more information. So when you click on it, there's just a bunch of status changes. And so I want to create a couple of screens. This screen here that's going to display all the orders, and then when you click on it, you can see all the different status changes that are taking place within a specific order. Okay, so if we go into our Supabase, we have this orders table here that we created when we were initially designing our database. And this table here has nodes, which is the same as requirements. So order requirements, and we have the gig ID, because when you think about it, you have gigs as a template, and then an order is what comes from that gig, right? Gig by itself is just it's a presentation, but if you want that gig to be completed, it turns into an order. But we are missing one particular column here. We're missing a particular field, and that is the user field, because, you know, we have an order, it's tied to a gig, but it also needs to be created by user. In the gig, we have the seller, but we don't have the buyer. Now, I see that the gig ID is not linked. It's not linked to any foreign key relation. So let me go ahead and fix that first. Let me go to this gig ID, and I want to add this column, and I want to link it to a specific gig table. So I'm going to edit this column, and we are going to create a foreign key relation to our gigs, right? This ID right here, our main gig table. Now, because each gig can have multiple tiers, we also need to store that information as well. So we are storing the gig ID, but we also need to store the actual tier that that person decided to purchase. So for that, I'm going to be adding another column. I'm going to call it gig tier. This is going to be numeric, and I'm going to hit save. All right, so let's go ahead and create our first order here. For notes, I'm going to say, please do a great job. Gig ID is going to be, let's say we need translation. User ID is going to be us. And the gig tier is the first tier, right? This is that lowest tier that we want. I'm going to hit save. Okay, so now we've created our first order. Let's go ahead, create another order. So I'm going to say insert a row, do a great job. The same thing. Gig ID, this is going to be a different editing. User ID is going to be us, our second order. And gig tier is 3 this time, okay? Because we are looking for, you know, top of the line gig, editing gig, right? We want really good editing job to be done. All right, so now that we have 2 orders here, the next thing I want to do is I want to display this data in our app. So we're going to go back to our app, and we're going to create a new table here. And if we take a look at the screenshot right here, it's very similar to our list of gigs. So we can duplicate one of these list of gigs. In fact, we can duplicate this one. I'm just going to duplicate it. Okay, so order list right here. And so this is going to get the data. Now, we need a lot of things, right? We need the seller's avatar, the gig seller's avatar. We need, what else do we need? The price, the date. We have the date stored on the table, and the notes as well. So we need a lot of things. And we also need the status, right? Whether the order is completed or not. Now, for the status, which is something that we need to show in the details screen here, we need to create another table. Okay, and that table is going to be the status of the orders. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to do another table, order status. We have ID, and what do we need? Well, we need the order ID, and this is going to be int 8. Let's go ahead and link it, and we need the actual status. All right, this is going to be text. All right, so now if we have the order ID, we can get all the statuses as well as the dates as well when that status was updated. Okay, so for instance, I can create a new record here, and I can say, well, this is the first order. This is for the first order. I think order ID 1 was, I think, for translation, right? So we're going to select that. Status is starting. Click save. Okay, so we have something here, and it automatically created a timestamp for us, which is perfect. Okay, if we come over here to our orders view page, right, this orders table here, we have a lot of foreign keys, which are primary keys on different tables. And so what we need to do is we need to create a view that's going to display all of this information. More specifically, we need to display the seller's avatar, the seller's name, and then we also need to display the last status. So there's a lot of information, and for that we need to create a view. So let's go ahead and create a new view. Come here, and we're going to create a new view. Create view to display order status, order data, and include order status timestamp, gig owner avatar, gig owner username, and What else do we need? And the price, the order price. And that's it. Let's see what happens. Let's see if it's able to do it for us by creating this complex join here. All right. What do we have? Order details view. Nice. Order ID, order created ID, nodes, gig ID. Okay, so we have all of this order information. Then we have OS, and OS is order status. We have gigs, we have user extra, and users info. This is awesome. This will take some time to do manually. So this is a really, really nice feature. Let's go ahead and save, create this view here. Okay, so we have orders detail view. Let's go ahead and view this. And what do we have? Okay, so we have one order, one record in our order details view created. And this is perfect, right? We have order tier, we have everything. So let's go ahead and display them in our app, right? So we're going to go back here. This is our list of orders, and we can simply display them using, actually, we need to refresh the data. Supabase, get schema, refresh the schema. And we have this orders detail view. Look at this. Beautiful. Absolutely game changer, this functionality. So let's go ahead and display it. Order details view. Okay. A list of rows. And we should filter these orders on our username, right? So we should, the only ones that should be seeing these orders, right? So what I need to do is I have this user ID. I'm going to set it equal to authenticated user ID. And let me double check. Yeah, we should have that user ID. There it is. Okay, so we should have a result because that is my logged in user ID, and gig owner's email is rob@rob.com. So that is the person that created the gig, and I am the one that ordered this gig. So let's go ahead and double check everything here. This should be the, well, we're gonna have the price and also some text. So this should be some information about the order. Let's go ahead and see. So we have notes, gig ID, status. We also need the gig name. Okay, we didn't get the gig name. Let's go ahead and get the gig name here. Okay, order details and gig name, we can add it ourselves. Gigs G, so it should be G name. Okay, that should do it. Let's drop this view and let's regenerate it. Drop view, order details view. Okay, let's rerun that. Okay, come back here, order details view, and we should see the gig's name. And there's the name. In fact, we should probably change that so that we know this is gig's name. There's lots of names there, and we should do it like this. G name as gig name. Okay, because as you can see, it's prepending that. Okay, let's rerun that. And I know it works. So we're gonna go back to our app. Come back here, get schema, refresh this, and we have this order details view, and we have gig name. Perfect. Beautiful. I really, really like this feature. Come back here. We should have gig name right here. Okay, so that's the gig name. We can delete that. And this should be the date there as well. Let's see, gig order created. So this could be the created date. Let's format it. And this should be the image of the gig owner's avatar, the seller's avatar, essentially. So let's come in here and come in here, gig owner avatar. Perfect. So we have the avatar. We also need the owner's name, should be under it, right? Under the image. So let's go ahead and fix it up. We have this row. So it should be, yeah, it should be under the image. So we have this row here and we have this column and it should be over here. Or in fact, it could be under this one. So what we can do is we can wrap this inside of a column, and then I can add another row, and now we have another row, and we can give it some padding, something like this, and I can have a owner, the actual seller. So this is going to be the gig owner email. Okay, so yeah, gig owner email, that's what we got right now. Let's use that for now, and let's see what this looks. We don't need top padding. Perfect. We do need, let's fix that. We do need bottom padding, but we don't need top padding. Okay, perfect. All right, so we have the gig, the seller's avatar, the seller's email, the name of the gig, and we also have the date created, the order was created. Let's go ahead and run this and see. But before we do that, I want to make sure that it has a NavBar. Okay, so want to make sure that this thing has a NavBar. All right, there's the NavBar. Let's give it an icon. This is going to be our orders. All right, so we have a list of orders. We need to delete this category because we duplicated the page, so we need to remove that. All right, so this is our list of orders. Let's go ahead and run this app and see what happens. All right, so here's our app, and if we click here, we should see our orders. And as you can see, these are our orders, right? This is our order right here. I will translate your documents. And this is the owner's, this is the seller here. And this is the seller's email. We can display name. That's the date, and that's the information there. And so as you can see in the backend, we are able to create a view that pulls all this data together and shows us our orders. Now, there's one thing missing here, and that is the price, right? So with the price, we need to look at the tier, and depending on the tier, we need to display that price for the specific tier. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. So just so you know that this is this document translating order, right? And this is this gig right here. If you take a look at this gig, here we can see that this is the gig right here. This is the gig ID, and this is this gig right here. The gig ID is 2. This is the order that's being displayed here, and as you can see, the tier is 1. And so what that means is that if we go into our gig tiers and we take a look for this gig tier for gig number 2, which is the translation, and we take a look at the tiers here, tier 1 price is 5, so it should hypothetically display 5. Otherwise, for another order, it's 10, okay, the first tier. So we're going to go back here. And in this case, what we can do is we can create a stack that will display the right value depending on the type of tier that we're dealing, okay? And so the price can be displayed above this right here. So we can display the price right there. And so for that, we can simply create a new row. And this is going to display the price. So I'm going to give it a little bit of padding. So something like this. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to wrap this in a stack, and I'm going to duplicate it 3 times, and I'm going to say this is tier 1, this is tier 2, this is tier 3, and depending on which tier that our order is in, we're going to be displaying that price. Now what we need to do here is we need to populate this data with the tiers, right? So unfortunately we do not have the tiers. We have the gig tier ID, and so we need to add the tiers to our view there, right? So we're going to go to the order details view, and we're going to come here, and I'm going to tell the UI to update this view, update the view to add different tier prices for this link to a specific and gig tiers. Okay, so something like this. Let's see if that works. All right, and there it is. Tier 1 price, tier 2. Perfect. This is really, really good. So we're going to click on accept change. And now we have the prices for all the tiers, right? And I need to add that drop order details view here. We're going to re-execute this, and let's go ahead and see. That should hopefully work. Order details view, and we should see all the tiers, and there are the tiers. Perfect. All right, go back to our app, refresh the orders, the Supabase schema, get schema, update it, go back here, and now we can populate it, the tiers here, and then only display the right tier that's specified. Okay, populate this tier 1 price, and of course we need to format it as currency, tier 2 and tier 3. All right, there we go. Now let's set conditionals. Okay, I'm gonna set a conditional. This is only its tier is set to tier 1. Right, we're gonna say order details view gig tier equal to 1. Okay, perfect. I can even copy this, come back here, conditional. This is going to be 2. All right, let's go ahead and reload the app, start a new session. All right, so here's our app, and if we click on orders, you will see all the information here. So as you can see, we are showing the price for this specific tier. So we have the gig, we have the order, and we have the gig tier that we order. So this is 5 in this case. And so as you can see, it's displaying one order that has all the information set there correctly. Now let's go ahead and create another order real quick. So we are gonna go in here, and we're gonna come into orders. Now we do have another order, but that order is not being displayed. Let's go ahead and see what's happening here. So this is the translation order. This is the ID here for the gig ID 2 that's being displayed. But this order, gig tier, for this gig tier 3 is not being displayed. So let's go ahead and see what's happening here. So it's something having to do with either the gig or it has to do something with the gig tier. And the reason the other order is not being displayed is because it doesn't have an order status. So let's go ahead and create the order status for that second order that I have. We're going to insert this row right here, order ID. Let's pick the order ID. And this is going to be with this gig tier 3. And the status is completed. Click save. And now if we go into our order details view, we should see that second order now that it has the status. And if we reload this, we should also see this second order in our order status on the app as well. Okay, let's come in here. And there it is. Okay, so I will edit your YouTube videos and I will translate your documents. This one is the tier 3, 50, and this one is 5. Okay, so as you can see, the list of orders is being displayed correctly. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we want to create another page that's going to display the status changes, right? The various status changes that are happening with the order. Okay, so we're going to go back here and we're going to create a very, very simple page that's going to list the status changes. So I'm going to create a blank page, order status create, and we want to pass the order ID here, which is an integer, and this is going to be order status. And all we're going to do is list the various order statuses for that order status ID. Okay, so let's start out very with a simple UI just to get things working. This is our list view. This is the backend Supabase query. Let's do order status. Let's add a filter, order ID equal to, and parameter, order ID, confirm. And let's go ahead and display it here. This is the status. And we can also display the created. When was that status created? So I'm going to wrap this widget in a row and add another one, duplicate this. And so we have status, and we have this one is status, and this one is going to be created at, and we can format it. All right, let's go ahead and maybe something like this. I don't know, something like this, I guess. And now when you click on this order list, you click on this container, we're going to redirect the user. This is going to go to order status. Okay, pass order ID. Do we have order ID? We should have order ID right here. And let's reload the app and see what happens. All right, let's click here. We have the orders. Let's click here and we should be seeing statuses, but I think we forgot to set the right permissions. So if we go back here, we go into authentication policies. We probably forgot to set the policies. We have not created the policies yet. So that's what we need to do. New policy, review save policy. Okay, now order status has a policy. Let's go ahead and reload this. Okay, click here, and we have the order policies. And we can do the same thing for the other order, and this one started the job. So if I add a new record into our order status for the particular order ID. So let's say for order ID 1, I'm going to add a new record like, needs clarification or something like that. And this is for order ID 1, need clarification. We should show both of these. Okay, so let's go ahead and reload this. All right, click here. All right, and there we have it. Started the job, need clarification. Okay, and obviously we can sort it by the date here, right? Which is probably a good thing to do. So order status, we can sort this, come in here, and we could order these, right? So you can order this by creating that, and you want to order it maybe in increasing order. And that obviously depends on your specific use case. And so at this point, we have the order list here, as well as the order statuses for each specific order. All right, now the next thing I want to do is I want to implement this real-time chat functionality. This is very, very important. It allows buyers and sellers to communicate, so you can always chat with your seller, with your provider, tell them that you want something to be done this way and that way, and it kind of instills trust in the platform. So a very, very important feature. So let's talk about this functionality. Now, typically the way you implement chat in any app is you have a couple of screens, right? So the first screen looks something like this, where you initiate a chat with a contact or some random person. And then on the second screen is where you are exchanging the messages, okay? But in this app, the flow is going to be slightly different because we already have this chat screen here. If you recall, this chat screen is the same as the order screen, essentially. Because with the people that you're placing an order, these are the people that you're going to be chatting with, typically. And it's the same thing on the other side. People that, you know, if you're a seller, if somebody buys an order from you, these are the people that you're going to be interacting with in any case. And so this saves us a lot of time because we essentially have this initial chat screen to begin with. The only thing that we really need to implement is the chat messages screen. And this is the screen where when you click on one of these chats here, you're going to be redirected there, and you know, you can type a message and the user can type a message, and you're going to have these alternating messages displayed on the second screen. And so, all right, so let's go ahead and implement these chat screen. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take this order list and we're going to duplicate it, and we're going to use it as a template for our chat screen. I'm just going to say chats. And so this is going to be the same screen, essentially, where you can initiate different chats. We might change a couple of things here and there, but the bottom line is when a user clicks on one of these chats, we are going to get redirected to a chat messages screen with the specific chat ID. And from there on, the user will be able to communicate with the buyer or the seller, depending on who they are. So I'm going to rename this to chats. Okay. And what's going to happen here is when they click on it, when they click on any rows here, it's going to do a navigation to chat messages, and we're going to be passing the order ID. So essentially the exact same flow, except it's going to get redirected to another screen. So let's go ahead and create this chat messages here, blank chat messages, and here we can just call it chat. Now this page is going to be accepting an order ID parameter, so that way it can look up and understand the messages, the chat history, etc., etc. So we're going to be adding a parameter called order ID, and this is going to be an integer. It's going to be required, obviously, and from that order ID, it's going to look up all the messages that each one of the parties sent to the other party, and then we can display them here. Now, before we can display the messages and do everything that we need to do, we need to create this special table. And so we're going to go back to Supabase, and we're going to create a new table called chat messages. And this table is going to have the following fields. So we need the order ID. Okay, so we're going to say int 8. We're going to link it. Orders right here, ID, save. The next thing that we need is the user ID. Right, and this is the user who sent the message. We're going to give it a type called UUID, create a key relation, users, click save. And last but not least, we need the actual message. Okay, this is just going to be text. Okay, and we're done. We're going to save this. All right, that table has been created. Now, as always, I like to create some dummy data so that I can see what the data looks like and I can see how I can display it, and to make sure that I'm able to actually get the data and display it in the app properly. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to insert a row, and the order ID, let's go look up one of our orders. How about this order right here? This is with the gig ID 1. Okay, so we at least can look up that gig ID. User ID, this is going to be me. Okay, so this is James, and my message is here is some additional order instructions. Okay, so maybe I sent a message to the seller, I gave him some additional instructions, and then I want to create another message, and this is where the seller replies to me. Basically, they say, okay, sounds good, or, etc. Insert a row, order ID, this is gig ID 1, I believe. Order ID 2, let me double check, is that, yeah, order ID 2 right here. So the same order ID. User ID this is the seller. Okay, sounds good. Working on your order. All right, so now we have two messages for the same order, right? That has the same order ID. And so now we can go to the app and we can create a page, create a screen for this, and see how we can display this data from this table here, okay? So let's go back into our FlutterFlow app, and we have these chat messages right here. And well, the first thing that we need to do is we need to go into Supabase here and refresh the schema. So I'm going to get the schema, and we have chat messages here. Okay, so I'm going to go back here, and here I can build a UI to display the messages, to input, to have an input for new messages, etc., etc. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Chat messages, come in here, backend query, Supabase query, and we're going to be doing chat messages. And what we need to do is we need to filter by that specific order ID, because we don't want to display all the messages with all from all the orders, right? We need to filter, right? So we're going to be filtering order ID equals to, and that parameter, right? What we were passing. Okay. So now we're filtering by that order ID, and in this case, we're going to be getting those two messages because that's all the messages that we have, and they're linked to that order ID. Okay. The next thing that we want to do is we want to create a list view, and on this list view, we're going to be doing a backend query, Supabase, chat messages, filter is going to be by the order ID, and we're going to be equaling it to order ID right here, confirm, and then let's put a basic text field here, and let's put the chat messages, and we can display the actual message. Now, at this point, we're just going to see all the messages. We still need to format it, but right now, I want to make sure that things actually work, okay? Now, let's go back to chats. Let's give this chats page a nice NavBar icon here. Search something like this. That looks nice. And now let's do a navigation. Okay, so this is no longer order status. This is going to be chat messages. Okay, and we're going to be passing this order ID, and the order ID is order details. Right here is the order ID. All right, so when they click on it, it's going to go to the chat messages, and it's going to filter by the messages for that specific order ID. All right. So let's go ahead and run our app here. All right, so here's our app. Let's go ahead into our chat screens. Now here on the chats page, I'm seeing two orders. They are from the same seller, but they're different orders. And so I can have a different chat with the same seller, but regarding a different order. So if I click on this, I should be able to see the messages for that specific order. Now I'm not seeing anything, and that is because we forgot to implement security policies, right? So if we go back to Supabase, and we go into authentication, we go into policies, we need to create policies for chat messages. Okay, so we're going to go back here, new policy, click here, I'm going to say allow all, and we're going to say true here, review, save policy. Okay, so now we have an allow all policy for chat messages. Okay, so now if we go back to our app and we refresh it and we click on one of our chats, this is actually the chat that we have the messages. We see that we have the messages. So here's some additional order instructions. Okay, sounds good. Working on your order right now. And so as you can see, we can click on one of the chats here, and it opens up the messages. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to build out this page. We need to make sure that the messages are being displayed correctly. Namely, my messages, I want them to be displayed on the right-hand side, and the other users' messages, I want them to be on the left-hand side. And we also need input for the user to enter and send their messages. So let's go and do that right now. Let's come back to chat messages, and let's go and fix this up. So we have this column here, and what we need to add is we need to add an input box, right? So we need to add a text field here. We need this text field on the bottom with this list view here taking up the rest of the space. And how do we do that? We come in here and we do expansion here. Now for the list view, let's go ahead and make it a little bit nicer. Let's put send our enter message here, and let's go ahead and wrap it in a container, wrap widget container. Okay, go ahead and fix this up. Let's make the width like this, and let's go ahead and wrap this container in a row. And what we can do is we can add another button here, right? So this button is going to say click here to send a message, something like this. And let's go ahead and fix this container up, maybe expansion, remove the width, remove the height as well. And now we have something like this. Let's remove the underline, none. Okay, so now we have a message box, we have a send button here. And for the send button, right, we're going to be adding an action, search for insert row, table is going to be chat messages, and then we can simply specify the fields. So we don't need to specify the first two fields. Order ID, we have the order ID. This is the page parameter. User ID, well, this is going to be the authenticated user ID. And the message, well, the message is going to be the input, right? This is the widget state text field, and I'm just going to rename it real quick, input message. And let's remove these IDs because they're going to be automatically filled in for us. All right, so now we have this. When we enter messages, they're going to be displayed right here. Another thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we refresh the database here. Okay, so we're going to go in here. We're going to open this up, and what we need to do is we need to make sure that new messages appear there. We're going to add another action, and this action is going to be refresh database request. We're going to specify this list view here, and that way the data is automatically going to be refreshed when we add a new message here. Okay, so we have this. Now the next thing that we need to do is we need to make sure these messages are displayed correctly. Okay, so how are we going to be doing it? Well, what we can do is we can wrap this in a container, right, to make it a little bit nicer, and we can wrap this container in a row. Okay, so that way we can specify where exactly do we want the message to appear. So we have a row, we have a container. Just to make it nicer, let's remove the height. Let's give it a height of something like this, and let's give it a width of maybe 150. Okay, so now we have this row that is going to display the actual message. And the next thing we want to do is we want to wrap this row inside of a stack. And that way we can have multiple rows. Now this row here, let's say these are my messages. Okay, so I'm going to say my message, my row. Okay, I'm going to duplicate this. And this next row is going to be other row. Right, this is another message, and the reason we do it is because depending on the message, we need to place it either left justified or right justified. So my row is going to be right justified. Okay, so we have this row, we're gonna right justified like this. Other row is gonna be left justified. All right, and my row is only going to be displayed if we are displaying my message. So I'm gonna set a condition here. We're gonna do a condition here, and I'm gonna say single condition. I'm gonna say chat messages row. I'm going to say user ID equals to authenticated user. Okay, so this is my message, and I want my messages to be displayed on the right. And I'm gonna take this, we're gonna copy this whole thing, and I'm gonna go to the other row. We're gonna do a conditional, and I'm gonna paste this. Okay, except this is not gonna be equal to, not equal to. Okay, so this is another person, and so this should create kind of an alternating display of messages, right? So like my message, their message, my message, their message, etc., etc. Okay. So let's go ahead and run this app and see what happened. All right, let's go into chats. All right, let's click here, and there we have it. So here's some additional order instructions. Okay, sounds good. And let's see if this works. Enter a message. So this is my message. It should appear right here. Looking forward to it. Okay, click send, and there's the message. Perfect. So it looks good. We still need to format it a little bit nicer, maybe give this padding, give it a little bit of padding. And the other thing that we can do is we can display when the message was sent, because on the messages table, on the chat messages, every row has a created field that's automatically created, right? So this knows when that message was essentially, written, and when it was saved to the database. So let's go ahead and fix this up real quick. These are some minor things. Let's do a little bit of padding. Is 10 too much? No, 10 looks good. We can also do on the container, you can give it a border radius, maybe a little bit more, maybe 10. And same thing here, 10. All right. Actually, no, this one doesn't have it. Padding is 10. Okay, border radius is 10. All right, looks good. Yeah, let's give it some padding. Padding is 10. Okay, all right. And let's give it padding on the container as well. 10 is a nice number. Perfect. Okay, so that's starting to look really nice. And now let's go ahead and create a text field that's going to display the time it was sent. So we have a container, we have a message. What we need to do is we need to wrap this in a column, okay? Because we want that the time to be displayed under the message, okay? So we're going to wrap this inside of a column, something like this, and I'm going to duplicate this, okay? So this is going to display under it, and let's increase the container, make it a little bit high. Okay, there you go. Okay, in fact, we can even remove the height, and this thing is messages. This thing is going to be the time, right? So we're going to say created ad, and now we can format it. And we're going to be doing, I like relative format, 5 seconds ago, 10 minutes ago, 1 hour ago. That looks awesome. Okay. That looks really, really nice. And let's do the same thing for the other one. Let's wrap this in a column, and let's remove the height because we don't need the height. And let's duplicate this text field. All right, so we have this text field. Let's do a created ad, datetime format. Let's do relative. All right, looks good. We can even make it a little bit smaller text. This is 14. Let's do the same thing here. Let's make it body small. All right, let's go ahead and reload this. See how our new UI chat messages screen looks like. Click here. All right, so it looks good. You could probably center it a little bit here and there, some, cosmetic changes. But as you can see, 24 minutes ago, 6 minutes ago, it looks really good. And I could send another message. Okay, I'm very excited about this order. Okay, send another message. And there's the message a moment ago. So it looks really good. You can, give it some nice formatting as you wish. It's up to you, but these are minor things. The most important thing is this works. Okay, so now if we go back, if you click here, there are no messages here. And what you want to do is you want to display some kind of a message, and you can easily do that with this list view widget. So if you click on this list view widget, you have this empty list view widget, right? And so you can display an empty one. And here you can create a component, right? So we don't have any components. We can easily create another component here. I can just create a new component, and I can just search for something like empty. Okay, so we can use something like this, empty list, create, and we can change it. Seems like you don't have any messages. Okay, and then you can delete that because there's a button, enter new message below. Okay, so something like this, change this to something else. Messages. Okay, perfect. Very, very easy. Then you can go back here, list view widget, and then you can select your component here. And now when you reload it, you should be able to see that there are no messages, that there's actually something being displayed telling, and that's important for users. Because if they see an empty screen, I think there's a bug somewhere, that they think that there's a problem with your app. All right, here's the app. Click here, and there's the message. It seems like you don't have any messages. Enter a new message below. Hey, how's the order? How's the order coming along? I want to check. Send message, and there's the message. And the other user, they're going to see the same thing. They're going to log in, and they're going to see the messages because they have access to the same orders, right? They're part of that same order as well. It's a two-party system, so they're gonna see the new message. Now I do want to remove. I want to clear this, right? So when you send it, you want to clear this input. Very easy to do. Click here, and you want to just clear this. Type clear text fields, and input message, and that's it. So when you send a message, you press enter. It's gonna send the message and clear this input. All right. So the messages system is now done. All right. So the next thing I want to do is I want to do this flow when they're ordering the product, right? So the user ends up on the gig page, they choose the tier that they want, one of the 3 tiers, and then they press the button, and this is where they order the actual gig here, right? So this is where the gig with the tier becomes an actual order. Now, there are a couple of things that we need to do, but mainly it's about inserting a record into the right table. Okay, so here we have the orders table, and so we have the orders table, and we have the gig ID here, the user ID, gig ID, and the gig tier. So all the information is here. So all we need to do is create another record in this table here. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. So let's go and check out our detail page here. And as you can see, we have that stack with 3 different buttons depending on the tier. And this is great because now we can have a flow here. So for instance, we can just add a flow, insert row, and we're going to be inserting it into orders, and then we're going to add the fields, and we're going to remove the 2 first fields because they're going to be automatically. The nodes, let's just not worry about the nodes as well. And now we're just going to put the gig ID here. So we have the gig ID, which is the detail parameter that's being passed here. User ID as well. User ID is our authenticated user ID. And the gig tier is going to be 1. Okay, so this is going to be one here. And now let's go ahead and test this app and see when we press purchase, if the new record is going to be created there. Okay, if it is, then we can just have the same flow for the other two buttons as well. So let's go ahead and start our test environment and see what's going on. All right, so here's the app. And let's say I go into categories and I see this translation category, and I see this translation gig. Okay, so I click on this gig and I see this purchase button. I'm going to click on this purchase, and now let's go ahead and take a look at our orders. And as you can see, we have a new record that was just created. This notes field is null because we are not saving this field. As you can see, the gig ID is 2 and gig tier is 1. So we're saving all of this information. And so now we know that the record is being created. Now, another thing that you want to do is after you create this order, you want to get your order ID right here. So you're going to get your order ID back and you want to create an order status row right there. So you're going to type insert row. And what you want to do is you want to select order status and then you want to create an order status. That's going to be very, very important because some views rely on order status in order to show you everything. So if your order doesn't have order status, you're not going to see any data in there. So that is very, very important. So we're going to remove this. Order status is right here. This is action output. We have an order ID right here. And for the status, you can just have something like started order, something like this. Okay. And so here you're getting back your order record, and here you're looking up inside that order record the order ID that you've just created. Okay, and so now if you run the app, you will see that not only will we create an order record, but we will also create an order status record for that specific order, and that is very, very important. All right, so here's the app, and let's say you're browsing some gigs, you like this gig right here, and you want to purchase the third tier for $50. You're going to click on purchase. You'll see that we have a new order status for this order ID number 4 here. Okay, and we can also go to orders, and you're going to see this 4th order right here for the gig with gig ID number 1 and gig tier number 3. And so like I said, this is very, very important because a lot of views rely on this information in order to display it all properly. Another thing that I want to quickly do is I want to create a confirmation page and redirect the user to the confirmation page. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So let's create something quick and easy, blank confirmation. And here we can just put something quick and easy, text. Let's go ahead and center it, put that inside of a container, something like this, hide something like this, and give it some padding off the top, give it a border radius, and we'll also give it some padding. Okay, so something like this, make it a little bit bigger, and maybe the container a little bit wider. Thank you for your order. Okay, so something quick and easy. You can customize it as much as you want, maybe even have a flow where you're sending an email as an email confirmation. So that's all we need. Let's go ahead and go to our detail, open this flow, and we're going to do redirection confirmation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy action chain, and we are going to duplicate it everywhere, right? So we're going to do it here, open, paste, and obviously we need to change the gig tier because this is now tier 2. And then we're going to do the same thing here, open, paste. All right, so now we have a confirmation, we have an order that's being placed, everything looks good. Now in the final step, I want to do a quick walkthrough of the app and see if there's some issues that I need to fix, because I noticed there's some formatting issues here, etc., etc. So let's go ahead and reload the app and just fix things that we did not fix before. All right, so the first thing we need to do is fix this overflow. We can easily do that. This is this home page, and what you want to do is you want to go on the column and you want to enable scrolling. Okay, so let's go ahead and reload that. That should fix that. All right, there you go. So there are no issues now, right? We had a little bit of overflow because this part wasn't fitting in, and now that we've enabled scrolling, we have all of these, we're seeing all of this here. Okay, another thing that I want to quickly do is I want to make sure this thing is only displaying the actual child categories, not these parent categories, and it's clickable as well. So let's go ahead and fix that right there. And for that, what we need to do is we need to create another view that only shows the children categories. Okay, so we're gonna go back here and we're gonna select this view here. And as you can see, this only shows is null. We need to create another view that's not null. Okay. I'm gonna come back here. Child view is not known. Okay. Run this, and now we have a new child view. Come back here. Supabase, refresh schema, and now we can go back here. Edit background query. Supabase query, and this is going to be child view. Okay. So we're gonna get just the children here. Okay. So we're gonna say confirm, and this is still gonna be name. Yep, this is fine. And let's make this clickable so that we can redirect to the list view and pass the category. Okay, so we're gonna come here. This is the card. We're gonna add an action, navigate to gigs list, and gigs list expects a category ID, which we have as part of this. This is this ID right here. Let's go ahead and reload this. All right, so here's our app. And as you can see, we're only seeing the actual child categories, right? And these are the categories that actually are tied to a specific gig. So if you click here, we see this this gig here. We see, click on translation, we see this other gig here. And so as you can see, this works perfectly. There's not a lot of issues. I can search for something, translate, and there's my translation category and my gig here. And I can also purchase these categories, and it's going to show me the confirmation page. It's going to add it. I can click here, and this is my categories view. I can click here. These are the list of orders here. I can click on messages, and I can see various chats. So as you can see, I have some existing chats here. And if I click here, I'm just asking the seller on the status, and they can update me when they log into the app. All right, so now I want to talk a little bit about my experience building this app, things I learned and things that I would have done differently. Now, this app is fairly similar to the apps that we built before. It has list views, it has detail views, it has authentication. These are all the things that we've implemented previously. The major difference here was that I used Supabase as our database backend. And that is because many of you have requested for me to use Supabase when building a big app. And in fact, I was curious myself what it would be like to use Supabase when building a complete app as opposed to Firestore DB, as was the case with the previous apps. Now, the biggest difference when using Supabase is that you're dealing with a relational database. Okay, so you're building various tables that contain different pieces of data, and then you have to link those tables through a process called joining. And so if you do not have experience with relational databases and you only have experience with NoSQL databases, as is the case with Firestore DB, then you're going to realize that things are done very, very differently. Personally, I come from a relational database background. So when I started with tech, when I started with programming, I initially was using relational databases, but still it's been a long time since I used relational databases. And so it took a little bit of time to kind of get used to it. Now, there are a couple of things that I really liked about Supabase. The first thing I really liked about Supabase is the UI. It's very, very easy to use. It's very, very intuitive, and it's really easy to hit the ground running very, very quickly. I especially like the fact that you can create various tables, and then you can create special views that display various pieces of data that's important for you for a specific situation. So if you're building apps that have to bring various pieces of data from different tables together and display them on a particular page or on a particular screen, then creating specific views is a natural workflow. I really like that workflow because I can create my tables independently, and when the time came to actually display that data, I can create a special view that displayed only the data that was required for that special page or that special screen. So I found that functionality very, very useful. Another piece of functionality that I found extremely useful is Supabase's AI assistant. I didn't really think that AI assistant is going to be that powerful and really allow me to create amazing views by generating fairly complex SQL statements. And so if you didn't have this functionality, you would actually have to learn how to create the right SQL statement for your views, or to select the right pieces of data, or especially to join various tables together so that you have the right data ultimately being displayed for your users. And while that is certainly doable, having this amazing AI assistant makes the whole process 10 times easier, if not 100. And so being able to create specific views that capture the right pieces of data for your UI, coupled with the powerful AI assistant, really made developing with Supabase a joy. I liked it so much that I definitely plan on making more app tutorials using Supabase in the future. Now, if you guys enjoyed this tutorial, the next logical step for you is being able to view and or clone this app. And you can do just that from my Patreon page. And if you're not yet a member of our amazing, rapidly growing Patreon community, then you're definitely missing out, because when you join, you will be able to view and or clone not just this app, but all the apps that I built on this channel. And so that means you'll get access to 100 plus apps that do pretty much anything and everything. And so regardless where exactly you are struggling on your no-code journey, chances are I built an app that solves that specific issue that you may be dealing with right now. And plus, you're also going to get access to additional content such as Q&As, live streams, behind the scenes content, and our Patreon supported masterclass series where I do a deep dive on a specific topic that the community votes on. And in fact, we're going to be doing another installment of our masterclass series very, very shortly. And so if you do not want to miss out and you're looking to take your no-code journey up a notch, whether you're looking to build apps for yourself or build apps for clients or even start your own software company, then joining our amazing Patreon community is definitely the right thing to do. And so if all of that sounds like something you might be interested in, you can learn more about our amazing Patreon community via the link in the description below the video. I look very, very much forward to seeing you being a part of it.